So the second lecture, it talks about monetary policy and banking system. Monetary policy and the banking system. So before that, what is money? All knows it is a medium of exchange. It is a medium of exchange basically. So if I ask you, can any commodity be given a tag of money? Any commodity?
Yes.
Just being an option that it is a medium of exchange, on the basis that it has become a medium of exchange, can it be tagged as a money? Why? What is the thing that is getting violated?
Want of, what you can say, desire of want. It will not
No, it is satisfying. All because it is getting exchanged. The main idea, it is not legally backed. Legal backing is what defines anything getting exchanged and what is called money. Money needs to have legal backing. That is the idea. That is the difference. All that differentiates between crypto and normal money. Crypto has all the functions. It is medium of exchange. It is measure of value because it has a particular value. It is store of value because some of them who have bought that particular at earlier stages, they are at profits. That defines store of value function of crypto also. Standard of deferred payments, it is also, what is that deferred payments?
that have been paid
Paid after a period of time. So that is a subset or a derivative of store of value function. All because the particular commodity has a store of value function that can be used as medium deferred payment system, but it is not a legal tender. And that differentiates between crypto and CBDC. CBDC, central bank digital currency. They have all the features. Apart from that, they are also legal tender. They are also legal tender. Why are they legal tender? Because they are centralized. Anything that is centralized has certain kind of regulatory system going into it, or certain central authority that is monitoring the movement of that particular commodity. So that is why CBDC has all the functions. It is encrypted, it works on blockchain technology, has no regulations, so it is decentralized. It is decentralized, that is why it has no regulation, and that is why it cannot be considered as a legal tender. The CBDC is centralized despite having all the features of crypto, but they are centralized, that is why they are legal tender.
Some countries have given recognition to crypto. So
In that country, that would be like Ecuador, I guess they have legalized. Salvador has legalized. So basically, they want to experiment with their financial system. That is the idea. No big country has actually legalized crypto, all because they do not know the flow of movement of that currency. It is very difficult. So this is the difference. M0 and M1, that creates majority of the issue. All are relatively easier. So this is the monetary base, or M0, M1, M2, M3, M4. So M0 is known as reserve money. And what is that money in circulation? If I say, or currency in circulation, there are two terms, currency in circulation, and in M1 you will find. So what is the difference?
it is something on the banks both. In the money, the currency in circulation, that was the money with both the banks and the public.
What part of money with the bank? The question is what part of money with the bank? Currency in circulation has two things:
Public and non.
currency with public, currency with bank. But I am asking what part of currency with the bank? What part?
Currency that is given to the public and being deposited back to the bank. That currency.
Is
demand deposit. Whatever
demand deposit?
saving and
No. No. For use of currency in regular transactions, whatever they are keeping those currency, you go to the bank, they have in the counters, they have a locker system, they have cash deposits, जिसको वो vaults कहते हैं. They have specific cash. So what RBI says that I have issued currency, and that currency is what is known as currency in circulation. RBI has issued it, that becomes the liability of the RBI. So they have issued it, but RBI does not know where it is actually. It could be with public. Public means anyone, the shops or people who have money in their own houses. At the same time, it could be with banks also. क्योंकि पैसा पूरा एक साथ तो सेटल नहीं होगा ना, हर समय कुछ तो पैसा किसी के पास रहेगा, कुछ तो कैश अमाउंट रहेगा, डबल काउंटिंग तो नहीं होगा. द आइडिया इज वो कैश जो रखा हुआ है और जो डिपॉजिट है वो दोनों ऐड होके बैंक की लायबिलिटी बनेगी.
जो बैंक के पास पैसा है वो फिर आया कहाँ से? उनको सेंट्रल बैंक में होगा.
that is a part of currency circulation.
कहाँ से?
See, RBI says, RBI has said that it could be either public or it could be people, businesses or shops, or it could be banks. Is there any other place the currency could be stored apart from those hoarding of currency in black terms, black money? There is no fourth option. So they say, so what is the currency with banks becomes this currency with public. So I am saying M0 is currency in circulation. It is talking about RBI's liabilities. It is talking about RBI's liability because RBI is the issuer. But as we talk about liquidity in the market, it starts from M1. It starts from M1. It starts with currency with public and net demand deposits with the बैंक. क्योंकि वो जो पैसा करेंसी पब्लिक के पास रहा और जो डिपॉजिट बैंक में रहा, द डिमांड डिपॉजिट पार्ट दैट बिकम्स नैरो, द हाईएस्ट लिक्विडिटी, एंड द बेस पार्ट गोज विद द लाइबिलिटी ऑफ द आरबीआई. कभी भी इसलिए इसको कहते हैं दैट बिकम्स मॉनेटरी बेस. इसमें यू विल सी एवरीथिंग हैज आरबीआई, आरबीआई एंड आरबीआई. So monetary base is all about the headache of RBI. It is the headache of RBI because it includes the currency which it has issued, the net currency that it has issued minus taken back. कुछ पैसा वो वापस ले भी लेते हैं, absorb भी कर लेते हैं, कटा फटा note that goes back into the system for getting it replaced. So that is the net part. Apart from that, bankers deposit with RBI. Any deposits with banks have with RBI that goes outside the money supply because RBI is not having any interaction with the general public. So that goes outside. So that becomes the monetary base. So through that base only RBI tries to multiply. That becomes a part of money multiplier things. So that is why it is known as monetary base. ठीक है ना? अब उसके आगे जब M1 narrow money में आया तो we are talking about demand deposit. So what is the difference between demand and time deposit? Demand deposit versus time deposit.
Deposit for a longer period of time.
Or the money can refuse at a point to give.
Exactly, that is the idea. The set of refusal by bank. The bank can say I cannot return it back the moment you have asked for the money. You need to either pay for the penalty or you need to wait till the maturity time. So that is why it is less liquid. Time deposit is less liquid. So we are here, the money supply is all talking about the liquidity of the system. Liquidity of the system. And to add to that, to add to the savings deposit of post office, these are also demand deposits. So M1 and M2 talks about demand deposit, one with the commercial part, one with the savings part, savings deposit. So if I ask you small savings schemes, just like if I ask postal deposit या monthly income scheme या postal deposits जो होते हैं, fixed deposits of postal, are they part of M2? Postal deposits? No, because they are time deposits. They are not demand deposits. Savings account अगर आप post office में खुलाओगे ना, that becomes a part of narrow. Narrow talks about how easily it can be replaced or it can be transacted with. That is the idea. The moment we go to broader part, it starts adding time deposits. So any small savings scheme is not a part of narrow money. Even if it is getting deposited with the post office, it becomes a part of broad in terms of M4. ठीक है? Savings deposit and time deposit. So whenever we talk about small saving schemes, those all are time deposits. It has certain maturity period. आज पैसा लगाया तुरंत नहीं निकलेगा. It will have maturity of 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. So that becomes a part of broad. So M0 is not considered as a part of money supply because it is with RBI. It starts with narrow, broad starts with commercial bank. Commercial bank. ठीक है ना? Banks से start होता है, banking and financial system से. So that is the idea. ठीक है? इस तरह से liquidity, which is the most liquid part? M1. M1. M0 is all the base with RBI. It is not related with the money supply वाला part. M1 is most liquid. हालांकि M0 का currency in circulation को आप consider कर सकते हैं, लेकिन M0 बाहर ही रखते हैं. Still, अगर categorically if it is given, M0 is the most liquid. Still, they won't be giving it. M1, M2, M3, M4 ही देंगे.
So what is national savings?
Exactly. There is small saving schemes. Small saving schemes means it is for general public, wherein a specific cutoff in terms of the maximum amount that can be deposited or that can be invested. So wherein there are various schemes like Public Provident Fund. In the same manner, there is National Saving Scheme, where they issue National Saving Certificate, which acts like a bond. It is just like a bond paper which gets matured after a particular period of time. So in the same manner, they have Kisan Vikas Patra. So all because we have different avenues to invest now, these are now more redundant. Only we are talking about PPF and one more Sukanya Samriddhi account scheme. Sukanya Samriddhi. So these are two of the most popular small saving instruments, but these are time deposits.
These are included in
M4.
Okay, these are in M4.
M4.
Why they excluded national savings certificate?
National savings?
Certificate.
Because national savings certificate goes with the government. वो मनी पार्ट नहीं होता, उनका अपना एक लॉजिक बना रखा है उन्होंने कि नेशनल सर्टिफिकेट्स को वो अपना एक्सक्लूड करके चलेंगे, पोस्ट ऑफिस के बाहर है. Everything that is getting deposited with the post office, that has to be included. That goes straight to the government, just like senior citizen saving schemes. वो मनी सप्लाई से बाहर का पार्ट हो गया. M4 मनी सप्लाई से बाहर का पार्ट हो गया वो. ठीक है ना? मनी सप्लाई में वी आर थिंकिंग अबाउट द बैंकिंग सिस्टम, वेयर इन पोस्ट ऑफिस ऑल्सो गिव सर्टेन. व्हाट इज अ बैंक? व्हाट इज अ बैंक? नो, bank is any entity which has the power to take deposit. And anything that has the power to take deposit, that becomes bank, and that has to be regulated by a regulatory authority known as RBI. वो बैंक, although we say NABARD, National Bank for, but those are non-banking financial companies. Those are all India financial institutions which are being categorized as banks, but they do not have deposit taking abilities. They go out of those, वो monetary उनका जो system होता है जैसे CLR, CRR and SLR. So that is the idea. Because post office works like a bank, because they have certain post office accounts, they are acting like a bank, so they become part of money supply. ठीक है? और यही चीज डिफाइन करता है the name bank does not mean it is a real bank. Bank in a normal sense it is an intermediary, but bank in monetary sense is the one which has the power to accept deposits. So if you go about any bank, you will have that banking system. Every bank has the power to accept deposit, and non-banking financial companies, apart from some few, most of them do not have those powers. The power to accept deposits.
So government की scheme that is not part of money supply.
Money supply के?
Government की scheme
If post office, if it is not a part of post office, just like post office deposits. एक scheme आता है, I'm not recalling that particular deposit. That is a part of money supply, all because that जो money supply जो regular public के बीच में चला जाए, लेकिन कुछ पैसे directly that goes into the public account of India. Public account of India. Most of the small savings schemes goes to public account of India. That is excluded from money supply. वो भी हाँ public में आ जाएगा, लेकिन एक post office का भी अपना scheme चलता है, वो चला जाएगा money supply में. All because it is a part of bank. जहाँ पे customer dealing लगातार होगा, that becomes a part of money supply. ये concept है. Why is it there? Because they have created standardizations. RBI has certain things. There is always a tussle between the government and RBI. So, what is the money multiplier? What is the money multiplier?
Depending upon how banking habits of a person, how much time or money is being.
How can you say what is a money multiplier if I say you?
that like how much more money are we generating by every
That particular deposit. One deposit, because it is being seen that if a particular bank gets some deposit, it will use that money for further rounds of lending, and in a way that would again get deposited, and this goes till infinite times. That goes through an infinite geometric progression. GP पर सुना होगा? And what is the summation of GP? 1 upon the ratio upon the ratio, that is the summation, and that is why money multiplier is 1 upon CRR. Because the reduction in the money supply is the one which creates the reciprocal of reduction. CRR, what is that CRR? It is taking that particular part of deposit outside the banking system and goes into the deposit monetary base. So how much money is getting created? 100 में से अगर 4 निकला 96, again 96 into 0.96, again into 0.96 square into 0.96 cube. So that becomes an infinite series. The summation would be 1 upon 1 minus r. That is the idea, and 1 upon 1 minus r would be 1 upon 1 minus r would be 1 upon CRR. यही वैल्यू होता है ना. 0.96 कैसे आया? 1 upon 1 minus 1 upon 1 minus r से ही तो आया. इसी को लास्ट में बोलते हैं ना 1 upon CRR. That is the idea. Why we take the reciprocal of CRR as the money multiplier. Okay? So in that way, basically the idea is how much money is getting created. So that is the idea of increasing deposits in the bank. So more accounts getting created, more money is getting multiplied. So that is the idea of financial inclusion. Financial inclusion has two things. One is socio-economic, you can say the parameters getting improved, but at the same time, the economy is getting formalized in terms of more money getting multiplied.
So खाली शेयर हो गया, बाकी रेशियो टोटल रिजर्व मनी क्यों नहीं
total reserve money. CRR is the one which does not generate any interest. No interest is generated for the bank. It is something that has been moved out of the money system as a whole. Circulation से सीधा ही बाहर निकाल दिया गया उसको. So why जो हम कह रहे हैं कि 1 minus R वाला जो था, the reduction that is happening is the CRR that is getting debited. That is an infinite series, and that is why it is 1 upon 1 minus R, that is 1 upon CRR. What reserves?
The total reserves that we have with statutory liquid ratio.
Statutory liquid ratio generates interest. It is more like an investment for the bank. What happens that CRR is the one thing which is strictly mandated by RBI. क्या होता है banking में? There is always a concept. There's always a concept. Banks क्या करते हैं ना? They have this that SLR also. They try to dive into that SLR. They know that RBI would be having those auditing at the end of the month or at the end of the quarter. So what they use? They use those SLR also to generate funds, loans के लिए. But that is why they are getting penalized. Penalty भी उसी तरह से लगती है. But what is with CRR? CRR is the thing that has to be deposited with the RBI. But SLR is the thing that remains with the bank. And SLR is just considered as like a safe deposit or safe investment. It is getting returned. If anything gets returns or anything that generates return, that can be considered to be a part of broader money system. But CRR is the thing that is getting debited from out of the system. So that is why it is taking 1 upon CRR. ठीक है ना? Not a loss, but the main idea is it is lost for the bank, but at the same time for the safety, for the broader system. It does not create any systemic risk. We have certain things with RBI. देखो RBI के पास भी क्या होता है ना? RBI has certain. RBI also works like a bank. It takes CRR, it deposits it, but on the basis of it, it tries to manipulate things. वो वहाँ से भी तो money supply वो create करेगा. लेकिन वो बैंक के खाते में पैसा नहीं डिपॉजिट करेगा कभी. बैंक को वो इंटरेस्ट नहीं निकाल के देगा. अगर बैंक को इंटरेस्ट मिल गया, it becomes an asset for the bank. If anything that generates interest for the bank, it becomes an asset for the bank. SLR is a kind of asset for the bank because it is generating interest. But CRR is a thing that is ensuring systemic crisis not getting triggered. एक तो उसका कैपिटल बैंक के पास अपना रिजर्व्स होना चाहिए. बट व्हाट हैपन दैट लेंडर टू लास्ट रिजॉर्ट, दैट वी हैव अ कॉन्सेप्ट बैंक इज अंडर दैट फेल वाला क्राइसिस पे हुआ. देन आरबीआई इंस्टेड ऑफ क्रिएटिंग एक्स्ट्रा लिक्विडिटी, दे हैव देयर ओन, दे आर यूजिंग एक इंश्योरेंस सिस्टम उसने क्रिएट कर दिया है. It is just like a premium that they are charging to ensure that systemic risk is minimized. That is the idea about collecting CRR. Collective risk banks ने उठा लिया by ensuring that 4.5% would be the premium that you need to pay without having any return in कुछ पैसा interest नहीं आने वाला उसका.
So CRR is adjusted after one withdraws the money from the bank.
CRR is
Adjusted means that certain amount of money bank gives to RBI, like say 4%. So when someone withdraws the money from bank account, so the RBI will adjust with the bank 4% the amount of money which they have taken as a CRR.
that is why it is known as NDTL. Net demand and time liability. It is getting settled every day. So it is just like a statistical calculation. So what would be the final value at the end of the day? That would get settled. If it is lesser, then the money would be credited back by RBI. If it is more, then extra money has to be pledged again to the RBI. That is the idea. So it is a general thing. So everything gets cleared by RBI. RBI has a clearing system. Every payment that goes through banking system needs to go to the Clearing Corporation of India that clears any transaction. RBI monitors it, but all because they cannot do daily task. So they say it is up to the bank, you do all the daily tasks, and if I find any anomaly, if I audit it, then I'll penalize you. क्या चीज? NDTL, I'm not sure about that particular time period. It should be 14, it could be fortnightly closing हो सकता है, but I'm not sure about the exact time period. 14 days, it could be. See, daily, what banks are doing daily transaction, daily settlements वो कर रहे हैं, but RBI is calculating for 14 day. RBI अपना 14, जैसे फॉर एग्जाम्पल लिक्विडिटी कवरेज रेशियो में वी हैव 30 डेज का वो उनका लिक्विडिटी मेंटेन करने का होता है, जितना उनका कैश आउटफ्लो होता है, दैट इज द आइडिया. बट दोज थिंग्स आर मोर, जो होता है ना एक कोर कॉन्सेप्ट जो कि दैट इज आउटसाइड. इफ यू आर प्रिपेयरिंग फॉर RBI ग्रेड बी, देन यू नीड टू नो कि व्हाट इज दोज इंफॉर्मेशन दैट यू नीड टू नो. यू जस्ट नो कि नेट डिमांड एंड टाइम, NDTL. व्हाट इज दैट NDTL? Sum of all the, but why is it net? नहीं, जितना विड्रॉ नहीं किया. Banks also has certain deposits with other banks, so that has to be excluded because that is not a liability, that is an asset for the bank. So net liability is total liability for the bank minus total asset for the bank in terms of deposits. जितना पैसा मिला, some of them, if there is no loan growth, there is no demand for credit, they try to deposit with other banks. Some other bank would have extra liquidity need, तो वो deposit कर देते, interbank transaction happens, that becomes an asset for the bank that has to be subtracted from the total liabilities because it is becoming an asset for the bank. ये आइडिया है. वो नहीं कि लोन वाला पार्ट को देंगे, वो जो बैंक को उसने डिपॉजिट कर दिया. इट इज ऑल डीलिंग विद द डिपॉजिट्स, नथिंग टू द लोन पार्ट. जो भी पैसा डिपॉजिट्स में कर रहे हैं. सो दिस इज liability. From bank's angle, liability would be all the deposits, time, others and demand liabilities. And what would be asset for the bank? Whatever the loan it is giving, and in the time, if I'd say time and demand assets, that would be extra cash that is parked with other banks. That would become asset for the bank that has to be subtracted to know about the net time. तो like to like को minus करना है, like for like. If you are talking about deposits, whether the deposit is acting like a liability or it is acting like an asset for the bank, that has to be noted. If it is acting like an asset, it has to be subtracted. If it is acting like a liability, because RBI would be looking at the net value of NDTL, based on that it will be calculating the SLR and the CRR, and that is happening every day. So bank, what bank do every day वो अपना, there is an account with RBI, they do daily transactions. It is all RBI which is looking into any fortnightly audit or quarterly जो भी उनका data होता है उस हिसाब से वो audit करते हैं. So don't go deep कि कहाँ से ऐसा होगा, बहुत ज़्यादा चीज़. RBI comes up with daily, they come up with various notifications. So it is more into बैंकिंग क्लास हो जाएगा फिर वो ज़्यादा बैंक के बारे में. वी नीड टू नो व्हाट इज द यूज इन इकोनॉमी rather than how banks are actually getting those things, कैसे वो पैसा चैनलाइज कर रहे हैं, कैसे वो कमा रहे हैं उसे. वी डू नॉट नीड टू गो इनटू इट. सो RBI is a central banking institution. So there are various functions. If I ask you what is the meaning of regulatory function and supervisory function, RBI has both the functions. So what is the regulatory function, if I ask you? In terms of banking, what could be the regulatory function? Bank credit, opening of branches, those PSL norms they are getting, these become part of regulatory functions. But what is the supervisory function? Bank as an auditor, they go to that whether those regulations they are getting followed or not. Apart from that, the core mandates, like for example, if I say the payments or the small finance bank has a core mandate of catering to those people who are less banked or unbanked. If RBI goes into that, looking into those functions, that becomes supervisory functions. Small finance bank, suppose a particular bank gets SFB license, small finance bank license, it has a core mandate that you need to cater to the people who are from semi-urban or rural area. You should add to the RRB's mandate, or RRB's का जितना domain है, you should add to it. But what if SFBs are misusing those guidelines and they are catering to some select individuals? So those functions would come under supervisory functions of RBI. Regulatory functions would only be related to the banking regulation acts. Banking Regulation Act, apart from that there are various other sections जो RBI Act के अंदर defined है. So that is all about the regulatory functions. So why I have asked you all, because RBI and NABARD, they have dual role as far as rural finance is concerned. In rural financing, RBI has all the regulatory function. If the particular thing is acting like a bank, what is a bank? It is taking deposits. If any particular entity is taking deposit, no matter it is under any other act, state act के अंदर हो या different act, apart from those banking regulation act, RBI has a mandate that it can ask for those particular entities to ensure to comply with the regulatory norms like CRR, or there are various other functions. But when it comes to rural financing and it is the supervisory function, it is up to NABARD to look into it. So NABARD can ask SBI also, if those branch is working in a rural area, NABARD has the authority to go and supervise SBI, that particular branch, because NABARD has been given as a supervisory authority as far as rural credit and rural development is concerned. So any scheme that is getting through any banks, irrespective, कोई भी ऐसा loan waiver हुआ and that is getting processed through any bank, then NABARD can come up with that. They can ask for the data, the details, the loan, that has the authority. But deposits, when it comes to deposits, it is RBI. So there comes the role, dual role क्यों होता है rural financing में. So all microfinance institutions are actually supervised and regulated by NABARD. Why? Microfinance institutions are not taking any deposits. The moment they take deposits, suppose there is an option, it is not allowed, my MFIs are only taking money from NABARD and they are using that money and channelizing that money and giving that as a loan to those who are unbanked. That is the idea of refinancing. So NABARD acts like a refinancing agency, but RBI acts like a supervisory as well as regulatory authority. ठीक है? So these are the functions. Monetary policy authority. So what is the meaning of monetary policy? If I ask you what is the meaning of monetary policy, how can you differentiate what is actually monetary policy and what is actually fiscal policy?
Monetary policy हो गया सर, कितना multiply जाएगा, क्या interest लगेगा, CRR.
So what is the core thing that they are looking at? Price stability. Exactly, that is the correlation. Inflation. Price stability. And what is the fiscal policy? Or public expenditure. Finance has revenue and expenditure both. That becomes a part of fiscal policy. So monetary policy regulator RBI has a core mandate to ensure that the prices in the general economy is stabilized and the rise should be within the control. It should not go out of control. That is the idea. And the matrix that they look at is inflation. So the matrix is inflation. That is why in 2015 we had inflation targeting as the idea. All because many of those emerging economies, those monetary policy जो frameworks था, what happened that many of them were failing in the inflation part. inflation were going out of hand. So what happened that we needed to act also before getting out of hand, things getting out of hand. So we thought that monetary policy should be all related with this price stability, and there should be an agreement between the government and the monetary policy regulator as far as how to maintain what should be the bandwidth of that particular inflation. Okay? Then currency issuer and bankers to the government. What is the meaning of banker to the government?
The accounts of the government is managed by the
Exactly. The accounts of the government is managed by the RBI. But what if I say the RBI is issuing bonds for the government? Are they actually functioning as banker to the government in that particular role? If they are issuing bonds on behalf of the government, are they, you can say, enacting the role of banker to the government? If they are issuing bonds on behalf of the government to manage the fiscal deficit? No. Any capital market thing is not a part of banker to the government. Bank is all related with the money thing. Accounts manage करना, ठीक है ना? वो पैसा interest का निकालना, interest, that is banker to the government. वो role जो होता है ना, that is a different thing. That RBI is acting like a primary dealer. RBI is actually like a firm which is issuing bond, and they are charging certain commissions. They charge certain commissions from the government, and that becomes profits for the RBI, and government says, give us the profit in terms of the dividend that you need to share it back with us. So RBI also earns substantial money. Then lender of last resort. What is this meaning of this lender of last resort? Who can take the money? Exactly, the bank needs to the bank. The bank can ask for bailout package from the RBI. Regulator and supervisor of bank, RBI, but rural sector, NABARD. Supervisory, it is only restricted to supervisory. Developmental role, exactly, all those plans, financial inclusion plans, awareness programs, those are developmental role by RBI. Financial stability is the one of the pertinent thing, and that is why apart from financial stability, there is a committee, Financial Development Council. So apart from RBI, all India financial, all those regulators, they are also part of this committee. And the core leader, or you could say the chairman of that thing, is finance minister. Still, the monetary policy regulator, RBI, has a bigger say in it, because it is the monetary policy regulator. If anything goes out of hand in terms of price disstability, it is the RBI which has to answer. And also regulator of money market. Money market instruments, everything that is within 1 year. Short term. Short term is 1 year. That becomes a part of money market, and that is regulated by RBI. So debt instruments have dual regulator. It is RBI also and SEBI also. If anything, any money market instrument is a kind of debt instrument. So if it is short term, it is regulated by RBI. If it is long term, it becomes a part of capital market instrument. SEBI comes into picture. QE, quantitative easing, is all related with growth. It is a macroeconomic concept. QE, growth and price stability. That is the whole financial system. That is the role of fiscal as well as monetary policy. QE is all related with when there is depression in economy. QE program is all mandated by the government, and it is the central bank which implements it. But it is the government which starts with it through issue of certain bonds which the central bank purchases, and in return pours in or increases the liquidity in the system. पैसा देना है, the government takes the hit. Government says we are exceeding the deficit target. So we need to come out with certain amount of money. So we'll issue कि हम बोलेंगे RBI को issue करने के लिए bond, and RBI would be the only one will be purchasing it. If the government, if the banks would purchase, that would mean absorption of liquidity from the market. What they are thinking, they need to inject liquidity. So RBI would be issuing it, RBI would be purchasing it, and that would mean quantitative easing. It is just like monetizing deficit, but that monetizing deficit at the time of depression. So what happens, that increases liquidity in short term, and when the economy again recovers, they absorb that excess liquidity. That is the idea. वो फिर वापस liquidity, फिर they issue those bonds to absorb that liquidity. QE is more related with the government part. It is more related with the fiscal policy. Lender to last resort is all about saving bank from collapse. All because if one bank collapses, that can lead to a systemic crisis. Many other banks, the confidence of borrowers or the confidence of depositors may go down within 2-3 days. 2-3 दिन में खत्म हो सकता है. So saving, it happened with Yes Bank. Yes Bank was bailed out initially by RBI. Then it was told to that SBI was told to purchase shares of Yes Bank. So initially, so for some days, Yes Bank was technically a public sector bank. Yes Bank was technically a public sector bank because it was owned by SBI for few days. So monetary policy is done. So monetary policy committee. So what is the meaning of casting vote in the monetary policy? So monetary policy committee has 6 members. Earlier, when this was thought, it was talked of having 7 members. But 7 members mean majority of the government or the monetary policy. So they came up with the idea that it would have 6 members. 7 members, either the government would have majority or the monetary policy regulator would have majority. So they came up with the idea 6 members, but RBI governor having casting vote. What is the meaning of casting vote? So RBI governor can vote 2 times. So to ensure parity between the government representatives and RBI representatives, they have 6 members. So that was the idea, and they always have to, what they do, they sign an agreement. Agreement between government and RBI. What should be the inflation target for the upcoming 5 year? Initially it is for 5 years. So it is technically currently it is 4 plus minus 2%. So we want to be in the range of 5 to 6% rather than 2 to 3%. Although we have set why 2 to 3% is not good for Indian economy. First one, exactly, the producers would feel that there is an oversupply or there is lower expected demand. At the same time, the government would also think that their projections of tax may also go down. All because the supplies are lesser, it means the demand is not higher, so GST collection would go down. At the same time, GDP deflator will have certain things. So that would mean we want to have inflation in the range of 4-5%. Technically 5 to 6 is ideal. 5.1 and 5.2, not in 2.1, 2.2. So inflation targeting, if that target exceeds for 3 consecutive quarters, the RBI is answerable to the government, and that is why last year what happened, RBI had an emergency monetary policy committee meeting, wherein technically monetary policy committee happens every 2 months at the first week of the month. February they had, April they will be coming up with monetary policy committee meeting. But what happened, that quarter was missing, 3 consecutive quarters, so they came up with emergency monetary policy committee, and they straight away hiked the interest rates, the policy rates by a substantial basis points. So to make sure that even though the target is getting exceeded, they are working out. It is not a mandate that they need to come up, they need to sit for a particular number of times. It is not that they will be sitting only for 2 months. They can come up with any surprise thing also. That is the idea. ठीक है? Now the cash reserve ratio. It is the most liquid asset. All because it has to be kept for use in case of any emergency. So the RBI also maintains it in liquid asset itself. RBI also maintains it in the liquid asset itself, and the banks cannot use this cash obviously. Why would they use it? All because it is ensuring systemic stability. Systemic stability in the banking system. Can RBI? What RBI can do, nobody knows. Exactly. They are not, any regulatory organization are not transparent. All because they have certain autonomy. They can work, they did not come up with data. You cannot come up with any, जो कौन सा होता है? RTI. Okay, how have you used that particular CRR? They are not bound by the things. Okay, so but see, everything is business to business transaction. The government cannot sneak in at the midnight and say, okay, we want certain amount of money from you, just give it without getting it disclosed. It is all about settlement, it is all about account transaction. So they keep it. That is the idea. They keep it with themselves.
The idea of buffer will be, what you can say, violated if they give to government for other organizations.
So what I am saying, what they want to do it is up to the RBI to decide. If they want to use it, they'll come up with their notification, all because RBI has the autonomy to take any decision related to the monetary policy. How they are using it? Just like incremental CRR. They had a concept of ICRR. What is that incremental CRR? During demonetization, apart from NDTL 4%, 100% over and above the normal usual NDTL, you need to keep it with the bank to ensure that there is no excess liquidity in the system. That was a temporary measure, and that was also implemented during this 2000 rupees demonetization. But that was not 100%, it was lesser, 25 or 30%, something like that. So they can come up with innovative tool, just like repo operation. They had this long-term repo operations, LTRO, during COVID pandemic, where the repo operations will see that what is the duration of repo operation?
Maximum 3 years.
How can LTRO, repo, I am talking about repo operations. It can be as less as 1 day. An average repo operation can be for 1 day. There is no definition. It should be less than 1 year. Else, after 1 year, it is something different. The securities does not come, वो security का issue हो जाएगा कि वो आपने pledge किया T-bills और वो security mature कर गया 1 साल के आगे. तो that is the idea. Statutory liquid ratio. This banks try to violate it basically. Our banks have to keep a portion in liquid assets, but with them. That is not to be kept with RBI, but that generates interest. Interests gets generated. So I'm asking, it talks about government approved securities. Does it contain any private security debentures? So the security should be, what I'm saying, 1 day, 14 day, 28 day, 1 year, it could. Okay. Can it include any private security or private bonds? Exactly. That is where those CRISIL rated CRISIL is a private rating agency, the Indian rating agency, which comes up with certain, like Reliance का कुछ shares, कुछ bonds are approved as SLR. That has to be approved by the government. One thing is that SLR, if it is kept as a bond, it generates interest and that accrues to the bondholder. So the bondholder here is the bank itself, so that in a way does not create any absorption of liquidity from the system. What bank think that we are investing some part of bank do not only think about giving loans, they also have certain investments. So they think that these are certain investments. In term of gold, that could be either bullion or could be gold bonds. Bullions भी होते हैं or it could be gold bonds. ठीक है? And SLR securities are different from those used for repo. So repo operations, if it is being used, SLR securities cannot be used as per the paper, but they use it. All because they use it. After an audit comes, they are penalized, and the statement SBI has been penalized 5 crore rupees for violating regulatory norms. What are those regulatory norms getting violated? Those bonds. If they feel that they are having certain excess opportunity to earn extra money, they dive into these.
मतलब वो money penalty से ज़्यादा है तो इसलिए करते हैं.
Penalty से ज़्यादा आएगा तभी तो करेंगे. Exactly. That is the idea. If somehow they feel that there is a demand for loan and they have SLR securities, they try to use it. And they pay interest. They pay penalty. And why banks were, because banks were using this methodology, so this MSF concept came into picture. RBI said, why are you actually doing this thing? You give us that extra amount, we are allowing you. RBI said, we are allowing you, but there is a limit that should not be excessive of 2% of NDTL. So that is why this is not a part of money multiplier, but CRR becomes a part of money multiplier.
सर आपने ये कहा 2% का बताना है.
I'm saying next. Okay, इसी में बता देते हैं. The third one is MSF, marginal standing facility. So under marginal standing facility, apart from SLR and CRR, what bank RBI has given, that you can exceed additional credit, you can give additional credit that should not be more than 2%. बैंक्स को जो पैसा मिला, बैंक्स क्या करे, 2% एक्स्ट्रा वो पेनल्टी को क्या किया बैंक ने कि SLR का जो पोर्शन था ना उसके अंदर वो इंट्रूड कर गए. All because banks have violated that norm, so that has become a norm and that has been set as standing facility, where additional can be, you can say, borrowed by the banks to give loans. But there the catch is you need to pay higher interest rate. RBI से क्या मिलता है? Repo. What is that repo? Repo मिला. Apart from repo needs certain collateral that has to be given to the banks, to the RBI. At the same time, MSF also gives the opportunity for banks to ask extra money from RBI, but that should not be more than 2% of the NDTL. And that too at a higher MSF rate. Earlier बहुत ज़्यादा रहता था MSF rate तो. Now they have streamlined it to a very lower level. There is a policy of 0.25 over and above the repo. Earlier it used to be more than 3%, 2.5-3%. So ये penalty charge होता था पहले. अब वो क्या कर दिया? It has become a norm that apart from repo, you can also ask for MSF. ठीक है? So this becomes part of ratios and reserve requirements. बट
सर इस सभी बैंकों के लिए या फिर लिमिटेड है इसमें?
नहीं सबके लिए. All the scheduled commercial banks, SCBs, scheduled commercial banks, they have those. There is one concept known as repo. What is this repo?
The interest rate at which bank provides, RBI provides loan to bank.
RBI provides loans to bank, but how does it get processed?
By buying it at a discounted rate, repurchasing the operation at a
Discounted rate. But the question is, who takes the interest? Who takes the coupon interest? What I am saying, suppose the loan has been pledged, the repo, the amount has been borrowed from RBI and the banks have pledged certain bonds. In the meantime, the interest is due. Who would take that interest? The coupon payment is due for that particular bond. Who is the owner of the bonds in this case? Does it go to the RBI or it remains with the bank? For the time being? No. How repo? Are you getting it? The question you are getting it. Suppose RBI wants to, banks wants to take some amount from RBI. It would pledge certain bonds to RBI. But in the meantime, certain repo, a certain maturity or certain coupon interest is due. Whom it should be paid?
To the bank.
Or to the RBI?
RBI.
In the meantime, it always is paid to the bank, to the bondholder. But what is the idea? RBI, banks give bonds to RBI, and simultaneously they also sign an agreement simultaneously. They say that they'll be repurchasing it, but the ownership would be lying with the bank. Pledging to buy at the future date. So the ownership does not get transferred. So that is the idea why OMO में different होता है, repo में different होता है. Both have certain movement of bonds and liquidity, but repo has no ownership getting transferred, but in OMOs straight away who purchase, that is why it is selling, it is repurchase agreement. OMO is selling and buying of bonds, but it is repurchase of agreement. It remains with the bank itself. It remains with the bank. Basically बैंक का वो जो bonds जो pledge किया ना, RBI blocks it. नहीं तो क्या करेगा, एक बार दिखाएगा इधर, फिर दोबारा वही bonds लेके आ जाएगा कि सर we also again we want certain amount. So that is why it is just blocking. RBI does not, physical movement on bond or any demat movement does not happen. It is just RBI is blocking those bonds so that it is not being used for further rounds of repo. नहीं तो क्या एक ही bond रखे रहेगा, बार बार जाकर के उसको बोलेगा कि I want that money. So it blocks that particular bond. But everything is happening on the system. It is the e-Kuber. E-Kuber is the thing that is, e-Kuber is the system, the core banking system. That is the thing which is, कोई physical ऐसा थोड़ी है कि जा रहा है RBI के पास और उसके पास वहाँ पे जाकर के उसको बोला you take this, I will come after 15 days and I will take it from you and you just give me the face value of the bond. Everything happens on e-Kuber, even the open market operations, everything, sterilization, it happens on e-Kuber. Everything is connected. CRR, SLR, everything is on, कोई physical movements नहीं हो रहा है. It is all about who is the owner of the bond. In repos, the same goes with the reverse repos. Same goes with the reverse repos. In reverse repos, RBI is still the owner of those bonds. Any interest, लेकिन उस बीच में क्या होता है? What happens? In the meantime, what happens? The payment is not settled at that time. वो जिसको interest ना वो block कर देता है उस पैसे को. And when this repo gets settled, the amount gets credited back into the bondholder. नहीं तो उसको फायदा कितना अच्छा रहेगा? You take that bond, we are getting those interest as if we care. We will think as if we are invested. We have invested. तो हमने pledge भी कर दिया. We are getting interest also. So it is very good investment. You have given us the money. You are saying that this is a collateralized instrument. We are also getting the interest. तो वो चीज what happens in the meantime, if any interest is due, that is not getting credited to the bondholder, to the bank, that is getting blocked. Only if that settlement, expiry of repo, at the expiry itself the amount gets credited back. So that is the thing that separates between OMO and repo. OMO में straight away ownership gets transferred. But in repos, the ownership remains with the, only the thing is block कर दिया गया उस चीज को. समझ में आया क्या difference? बस उसका क्या, ये चीज difference है बस उसमें.
Sir, as of now, what is the interest that is being given under statutory liquid ratio?
Interest.
जो मिल रहा है, वो सर फिक्स है ना, चेंज होता रहता है?
Interest is all about the bond which is getting pledged. It is all about the coupons on the bond. Suppose अब गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया का कोई बॉन्ड होगा जो 2030 में मैच्योर हो रहा होगा एंड इंटरेस्ट ऑफ 6.5. इट विल हैव द, व्हाट इज द आइडिया ऑफ बॉन्ड? कैपिटल मार्केट. इन डेट मार्केट फिक्स्ड month yearly payment is given in terms of coupon payment, and it is said whosoever holds the particular bond at a particular cut-off time, they give it कि the interest would be credited on suppose 31st of March, and they'll say whosoever holds the bond on 15th of March, that particular entity would be considered as the bondholder. At particular time पे, उस particular that period, they'll say कि as on 15th March, whosoever holds that, all because it is a secondary market instrument, it's a tradable commodity. It is not being held till maturity. So they need to come up with the cut-off date. They come up with the cut-off date. Whosoever is the holder, they'll credit it in the bank account or in the account of that particular bondholder. समझ में आया? वो इस तरह से काम कर रहा है. नहीं तो ऐसा क्या चलेगा? तो पता है, पूछता ही रह जाएगा. The government of India would be thinking in whose account I have to credit that particular amount. We are not knowing it. All because of the transactions happen every day. The same bond is getting transacted in the secondary market. तो उसको कैसे they come up with the cut-off date?
नहीं सर, जैसे मतलब so the 18% of banks net demand and time liabilities would be given to RBI. So in that
18% would be given to the RBI. No.
In SLR.
It remains with the bank.
So in that 18%, the amount that is being deposited, they would get some interest.
Exactly.
From it. And if the bank has placed some bonds to it, they would also get the interest on the government securities as well. If they have those particular government securities in the SLR ratio.
I'm not getting it. What you're saying.
So like,
suppose they have used. You're saying SLR securities. This 18% is the quantum of deposit, the proportion of deposits. Correct. That has to be kept as in the form of SLR. Correct. And SLR.
And they would get some interest on it in the 18% in detail.
No.
They'll not get 18%.
What I'm saying, they are getting interest from deposits.
So this 6.5% is a part of 18%, right?
6.5% is the, suppose they have invested this thing in government bond, they'll get interest on it. हाँ.
तो लेकिन 18% से that does not like,
18% is the amount of deposit. 100 रुपये का जो टोटल NDTL था, उसमें से 18 को उनको उसमें डिपॉजिट करना है गवर्नमेंट अप्रूव्ड सिक्योरिटीज और लिक्विड कैश और समथिंग लाइक दैट, एंड दे कैन गेट इंटरेस्ट इफ दे हैव इन्वेस्टेड इन गवर्नमेंट सिक्योरिटीज और इन एनी बॉन्ड्स. नो, क्यों क्या? तो इन्वेस्ट करते ही हैं मोस्ट ऑफ देम. दे इन्वेस्ट इट. They invest it. RBI is not giving any interest.
Based on the instrument what they buy,
they get that interest. ठीक है? So these are the use of quantitative tools. quantitative tools you use. So reducing money supply would be to control inflation, and increasing money supply would be to increase inflation.
So bank rate or LAF? Bank rate or LAF?
What is?
Bank rate and liquid.
Exactly. LAF is repo and reverse repo. Repo and reverse repo are part of LAF, liquidity adjusting facility, and MSF. These are part of LAF. Liquidity adjusting facilities.
At present, bank rate is used.
No, at present there is no concept of bank rate, although they publish bank rates. But now, all because we have matured secondary market and capital market also, there is no concept of long-term borrowing from RBI. वो concept बहुत ज़्यादा चला. It is all about repo operations. That is why policy rates are technically considered as repo rates. That is the idea. Ab bank rate is no more getting utilized, all because banks are not going into long-term borrowing from RBI. ठीक है ना? But what is the idea of increasing money supply? It is not to increase inflation, it is to usher in growth. So whenever any monetary policy is concerned, it is not only related with the you can say money supply thing, it is also related with the growth aspect. So the idea is overall stability, growth with price stability. That is the mandate of RBI. Growth bhi karna hai, price stability bhi karna. That is why what happens at times, RBI, despite having higher inflation, if the growth rates are higher, they do not increase the interest rate. The inflation is higher, but the growth rates are also very high. So what they say, they'll wait for some time, and that is getting, we can say, those are the stances of RBI. Those are various stances of RBI that they take, whether hawkish, dovish, accommodative. Calibrated, dovish stance is not more popular with Indian scenario. Dovish is something different. It is either hawkish or accommodative or neutral. Calibrated approach is more related with the tightening, calibrated tightening. What RBI is doing right now, calibrated, क्या करना है अभी?
RBI in case of OMO, they can buy only in secondary market. Right?
Exactly. OMOs. Obviously, buying or selling, that depends upon whether they want to inject liquidity or absorb liquidity. Or it could be sterilization also.
To modify the bond yield.
Bond yield also.
They cannot buy in the primary market, right?
Primary market is all related with deficit financing then. If they are buying, they are issuing bonds, government bond, and they are again buying in the primary market itself, then that is basically they are financing the deficit of the government. They have deficit financing. If they are operating in the
Government will issue bond with RBI ke through, na?
Hamesha, and RBI is the only one who is purchasing it.
Why RBI will issue bond and
Purchased to finance the fiscal deficit. This is the idea of quantitative easing. पैसा बाई किसके लिए किया? खुद के लिए. इशू किसके नाम पे किया था? गवर्नमेंट के नाम पे. पैसा गवर्नमेंट के पास कैसे जाएगा? आरबीआई से गवर्नमेंट के पास पैसा जाना है. व्हाट इज द मेथड? RBI would say, okay, you issue the bond and we'll purchase it.
In the secondary market?
In the primary market. Primary and secondary. If the bond is getting issued, RBI says, you issue the bond and we will only purchase it.
In the secondary market?
I'm talking about deficit financing. Issue primary. Hamesha bonds get issued in the primary market. That is the idea. If the bond has this thing, the bond would be issued, it would be open for subscription for this many days. And it is said that this particular is blocked for retail investors, this is for domestic institutional, and this portion is for foreign institutional investors, because they have certain capital account convertibility and there is certain restrictions. What happens if those bonds are not subscribed, then RBI purchases it. It is not the guarantee that every bonds would get subscribed. It may so happen that banks are not needing those government securities because they have different avenues to invest. They have higher loan growth. They are utilizing those deposits for giving loans rather than buying bonds. So what would happen? The bonds would remain unsold, so RBI would purchase it. That would be in primary market.
By printing money.
No, नहीं भाई खरीद लिया बैंक के आरबीआई से पैसा चला गया गवर्नमेंट के पास. थ्रू दैट आरबीआई हैज दोज बॉन्ड्स. आरबीआई के पास वो बॉन्ड्स आ गया. नाउ इफ आरबीआई वांट्स टू रेगुलेट मनी सप्लाई, देन इट वुड यूज दोज बॉन्ड्स इन द सेकेंडरी मार्केट थ्रू ओपन मार्केट ऑपरेशंस. हाउ वुड आरबीआई हैव बॉन्ड्स देन? आरबीआई के पास तो कभी बॉन्ड ही नहीं रहेगा. वो बोलेगा कि आई वांट टू हैव ओपन मार्केट ऑपरेशंस एंड आई डू नॉट हैव द बॉन्ड.
Then things will be traded in second hand.
Tradable. Don't talk about second hand thing.
They can sell and buy in both primary and secondary market.
Yeah, RBI has everything. RBI is the banker to the government and also ensuring that the monetary stability is there. तो पैसा अगर पहली बार इशू हुआ, जरूरी नहीं है वो पैसा सब्सक्राइब हो जाए बॉन्ड्स, लेकिन बैंक दोज गवर्नमेंट नीड्स. व्हाई वुड गवर्नमेंट इशू बॉन्ड? इट इज इन नीड ऑफ मनी. Either it gets financed by those retail investors or banks investors, or RBI would finance it. So RBI gives that security to the government that even if that is not getting subscribed, I will purchase it and I will issue the money to you. Whom the money would get issued? To the government. But when OMO is getting done, it is all to regulate money supply through secondary market. And there's one another thing, sterilization. There's a concept called sterilization. OMO is in secondary market. There's a concept called sterilization. Suppose foreign investors, they want to invest in India. So they'll come up with dollars. They'll say, okay, give me that much amount of rupee. So that would go to foreign exchange reserves and RBI would issue equivalent rupees. That money is in the market. So that increases liquidity. So that may so happen that it increases inflation in the market. So RBI says, okay, I will exchange the money, but at the same time, I will issue the bond to absorb back the money. You take the money, the FIIs will take the money, they'll put the money in the market, and RBI would again float those bonds through OMOs in the secondary market to again suck back the liquidity, so as to make sure that there is no excess liquidity, all because of inflows of foreign exchange. Two-step procedure, both are done and those simultaneously, and that is known as sterilization. Sterilization, OMOs are all in secondary market. Deficit financing is all about primary market operations. Bonds तो issue करना ही पड़ेगा. यही बोला ना, backdoor entry नहीं है कि आप ऐसे ही पैसा दे दो. RBI also owes the money to the public. RBI also owes the money to the public. तो पैसा फिर public का पैसा बैंक government के पास चला जाएगा without any security. What is a bond? Bond is a guarantee that if it is getting defaulted, that means there is a serious issue with the government. So there is a fixed interest and maturity में principal amount पैसा वापस करना होगा. That is the idea of bond. Now qualitative controls. So what are the qualitative controls? One is margin requirement. And what is the idea of margin requirement? What is that margin? No. I'm talking about now qualitative. Quantitative statistical tool has ended. Qualitative is?
It is qualitative. Margin requirement.
And what is that margin requirement? What is the idea about? No. PSL is all about credit rationing. Margin requirement is all about loan to value ratio. How much amount of loan would be given for the amount of collateral that has been pledged? If the RBI wants to control money supply, it would increase or reduce. It would increase. Loan to value ratio means loan given upon value of collateral. So suppose RBI wants to control credit. So would it increase LTV or would it reduce LTV? Reduce it. Tightening. Reduce money supply. It would reduce LTV, and that is the idea of margin. It is the value of collateral minus value of लोन गिवन. कभी भी ऐसा उल्टा तो नहीं हो सकता कि लोन ज़्यादा दे दिया कोलैटरल कम का ले लिया. दैट इज़ अ फुलिश थिंग कि लोन आपने ज़्यादा दे दिया एंड यू हैव आस्क्ड फॉर लोअर कोलैटरल, दैट वोंट बी रीपेड, दैट इज़ फॉर श्योर. तो वो पैसा लेके बाहर चला जाएगा. सो इफ मार्जिन रिक्वायरमेंट इज गेटिंग इंक्रीज्ड, दैट मीन्स consumer credit is getting regulated, or loan to value ratio is getting decreased. That is a corollary, a derivative, same thing. लोन टू वैल्यू रेशियो अगर इंक्रीज कर देंगे तो मनी सप्लाई बढ़ जाएगा, लोन टू वैल्यू रेशियो डिक्रीज कर देंगे मनी सप्लाई गिर जाएगा. एंड दैट इज हाउ दे क्रेडिट कंट्रोल करते हैं उसमें. सपोज इन टाइम्स ऑफ मॉर्टगेज सब प्राइम लेंडिंग, लोन टू वैल्यू रेशियो क्या कर दिया था, बढ़ा दिया था 7-8. Even if you had those useless mortgage, we used to give good loans, higher loans. Bubble. It was all about repackaging. वो तो बहुत ही complex system था. Then it is moral persuasion, wherein the government says or the RBI says through developmental rules it goes to the bank, it issues advisories that you need to come up with certain regulations. Like first they'll say moral suasion. If that is not getting heeded to, then they'll take strict actions, or they'll take credit rationing or consumer credit rationing करना start करेंगे. Just like this in 2-3 months back, one advisory was issued about sub 50,000 buy now pay later loan. It is getting, there is a higher probability of higher default rates. Sub 50,000, below 50,000 ticket size loan, there is a higher probability, all because these are unsecured credits. So there is a higher probability that it may get defaulted. So that was why it was an advisory was issued. But still banks did not heed to. So RBI came up with a higher risk weight. RWA, it came up with a higher risk weight that increases the capital adequacy norms. Consumer credit क्या होता है? Suppose the bank wants to, or the RBI wants to regulate that unsecured loan market. So what RBI would do, it would say the bank to either ensure that lower proportion of loan is given to those unsecured area, or you increase the risk weight. Risk weight, we'll come to know that in the next part. What is the risk weight? Every loan has a category, and lower the risk, lower is the risk weight. Higher the risk, more is the risk weight, and based on that you need to have a higher capital adequacy. That is the idea. अगर ज़्यादा risk weight हो जाएगा तो आपको ज़्यादा कैपिटल मेंटेन करना पड़ेगा, और इस तरीके से कंज्यूमर क्रेडिट को कंट्रोल करते हैं वो रिस्क वेट्स का डिफरेंट करके. एक तो हो जाएगा कि दे कम अप विथ CRAR कि यू नीड टू इंक्रीज CRAR, दैट इज स्ट्रेट अवे CRAR को इंक्रीज कर दिया गया, कैपिटल एडिक्वेसी रेशियो का वैल्यू बढ़ा देना. एल्स दिल से कि दैट पर्टिकुलर पोर्शन ऑफ लोन इज गेटिंग रिस्कियर, सो यू इंक्रीज द रिस्क वेट. रिस्क वेट से क्या हो जाएगा, उनका लोन का जो असेट का जो वैल्यू है उस पर उनको ज़्यादा वैल्यू आपको कैपिटल में Tier 1 कैपिटल और हाई क्वालिटी कैपिटल की तरह रिजर्व्स रखना पड़ेगा अलग से. हाँ, बासेल नॉर्म्स नेक्स्ट में देखा समझ में आ जाएगा. ओके, capital to risk weight asset ratio. It talks about, in short, it is known as capital adequacy ratio. It is a ratio of capital of the bank, which is tier 1 and tier 2 depending upon the quality, upon and what is that risk weight assets. What happens that there is home loan, vehicle loan, credit card, BNPL, buy now pay later. If they say 10% risk weight, if they say 50% risk weight, if they say 100% risk weight, जैसे रिस्क वेट होगा अगर इसमें इफ देर इज 100 crores ऑफ लोन इन होम लोन्स कैटेगरी, सपोज तो उसका 10% दैट बिकम्स 10 crore. So that is the risk weight asset. You keep on adding things based on the total loan given into the risk that has been attributed. If risk weight goes higher, then denominator goes higher. To make sure there is a mandate of ensuring 9 to 12% of CAR that has to be maintained, that means numerator has to go up. If RWA increases, denominator increases, with the same amount of numerator, this value would go down. To maintain that adequate value, this has to go up. So either tier 1 capital would go up, that includes banks common equity tier, जो banks का shares जितने पैसा लगा रखा है, shares by the promoters technically. So that is why bank recapitalization happened in public sector banks. There was an issue with some of the banks which were not maintaining adequate capital adequacy ratio. That is, as per Basel norms, it is 9%, but RBI mandates 12%. For NBFC has 15%. And within that NBFC, they had categorized, there was a committee which came up with categorization of NBFC. Highest risk NBFC was being talked of having a CAR of 22%. तो मार्केट से ही बाहर हो जाते, फिर उनका पूरा पैसा कैपिटल में ही लॉक हो जाता. That money cannot be used for any lending purpose, and that money cannot be pledged through depositors' money. The promoter has to bring fresh capital. So why bank recapitalization happened? All because the quality of assets went down. It went into those higher risk weight category. It needed more capital to maintain the numerator part. So it needed more money from the promoter. And who was the promoter of public sector bank? It was the government. So that was why bank recapitalization was done through budget. And that is not a good sign. So basically you are bailing out through public money. All because they have done something wrong. They have done irrational lending. You are using public money that could have been used for some other purposes, developmental purposes, that is being used to bail out banks or keeping them from getting collapsed.
So that money, if it has gone through budget, so that now the public is a shareholder of now the bank.
The government is the shareholder. Government is the shareholder of public sector bank. Bank recapitalization only happened for public sector banks, not for private banks. If private banks do not cater to those norms ना, तो उनको पहले ही license cancel कर देंगे उनका. That is why private sector banks stay away from risky lending. They do not go into venture out into, so the majority of loans would be home loans. All because it is collateralized. They know it, कि they have collateral to back it up. So that is why if you see the capital adequacy of those banks, private sector banks, they are more prudent in terms of choosing those, you can say, borrowers whom to give loans. All because they know it, they need to maintain the CAR, and CAR for private sector bank means additional capital from private entity. There is no government entity or there is no moral hazard. यहाँ पे moral hazard, concept of moral hazard happens. The third party risk comes into picture. Some other person, some chairman or some board of directors took a decision to increase a lending in a particular area. That led to higher exposure to risky assets. That required more capital, and they are being bailed out through public money. That is the useless part, and that is
PSL वाला concept मतलब वही loss करवा रहे हैं ultimately कह सकते हैं.
नहीं PSL is
मतलब जो lending होती है
PSL में, although it is the idea, PSL में the default rates are relatively higher, all because the collaterals are lesser or it is unsecured, but still we have developmental rules also for the bank. That is why PSL norms is not adequately monitored, or private sector banks do not cater to those things. वो 40% से ऊपर कभी जाएंगे ही नहीं. That is why they always buy PSL certificates. There is a concept of PSL certificate. If 40% mandate is not getting reached, you can buy the PSL certificate. Who is taking the loan? The public sector bank. So that is the idea. So they had to come up with RRBs to cater to rural finance.
So this RWA depends upon the borrower type, like his
RWA depends upon the category of loan.
not borrower.
It is the category of loan, and it can go even to above 100%. This buy now pay later has a category of 125%.
So you number one decide.
RBI. RBI comes up with directives. Okay, we are raising that risk weight for those loans. So those sub 50,000, they increase the category 100 से 125%. So that gives a discouraging signal for banks or institutions to go into buy now pay later, because they'll have to maintain additional capital. That is the idea of capital adequacy ratio.
Also, sir, bank recapitalization, it leads to increase in
Tier 1 amount, because it is all about promoters' capital getting locked into it. So tier 1 is all about either you have reserves, your own reserves, those undistributed part of the profit that I told you, your bank's personal income, there is distributed, that goes to the dividend part. There is also a portion that is undistributed that goes to the firm, that becomes reserves. जो उनके reserves होते हैं. So the reserves plus promoters shares, the amount that they have brought in as a capital, that becomes tier 1. Tier 2 is more related with revaluation reserves. अब revaluation कैसे करते हैं, वो एक complex accounting thing है. Suppose they have invested in plants and machineries and fixed assets में, so with time the value appreciates कुछ चीज़ का. So with time periodically they have this revaluation getting done. It's all about accounting of balance sheets. So whatever is the additional amount, they say that they are transferring it to revaluation reserves. Although those are accounting things, no actual transfer of cash is happening. So that is why it is not getting considered. It is all about tier 1 capital, high quality assets. Then the other aspect is liquidity coverage ratio. There are three things: buffers, liquidity coverage ratio, and capital adequacy ratio. That comes into Basel III. There are many other targets also. One is liquidity coverage ratio. So it is all about high quality liquid assets upon total cash outflow for 30 days. And what 30 days has to be selected? The stressful 30 days. The banks come up with the data that within a particular period which is under consideration, this was the period where it was higher cash outflow. So based on the data, they need to come up with additional high quality liquidity. जैसे उनका एक particular जनवरी फेब से लेकर दिसंबर तक उनका cash outflow, they have the data, and it was found that it is in June the net cash outflow or the total cash outflow was the highest for the bank. So based on, suppose it was rupees 30 crore, so bank needs to have rupees 30 crore every time with them set aside to ensure that if the thing gets repeated, they have liquid assets or liquid thing to manage any bank run, to protect thing from bank run. क्या होता है ना, कभी कभी अचानक से many depositors may come. What is cash outflow? It may be the depositors asking for their money back. That is the cash outflow for the bank. So what may happen that many people may come. So it is for the bank to maintain. कभी कभी एक दिन में ही ऐसा हो सकता है कि पूरा बर्बाद हो सकता है सिनेरियो. So they need to maintain, and that normal सबसे कम दिन का वो नहीं लेना है. It's all about the stressful period. It is dependent on, there are criteria. Don't go deep into it. कि क्या, what should be the criteria? It is all, UPSC won't be asking those things. It is all about what should be the criteria, because you are making sure that you can sail through those difficult time. That is the idea behind Basel norms. ठीक है ना? It is not कि in heydays that you are thinking just for the sake of maintaining those ratios, you are ensuring those ratios. You need to make sure that the bank needs to make sure that in difficult times they can overcome those challenges. High quality cash. Not cash अपना अलग से reserves. The profits का एक portion करके रख देंगे. Deposit, whatever is the thing that is for the bank, asset for the bank. वो अपना, deposits are not asset for the bank. Deposits are the liabilities for the bank. So how can they?
The loans given will be cash. You said
Cash, high quality. Even in those loans, what is the prompt repayment? They'll consider it. They'll set aside those things. Okay? So the policy stance of the RBI talks about this is not applicable to India generally. Why? Dovish is all related to very low inflation. Very low inflation, very low growth. Yesterday only we had this, inflation is coupled with, growth is coupled with inflation. So dovish stance is all when the inflation is very low in the range of 0.5 or 1. So banks maintain 0% rate. The policy rates are nearly zero. Or that is the dovish stance. It is more related to the developed economy, because they need to make sure that they do not go into negative growth territory. Recession में नहीं हो जाए. See what happens. First inflation से disinflation होता है. Dis से deflation होता है. And the moment deflation happens, it gives a signal that recession is coming. Recession and boom is an economic concept. Inflation, disinflation and deflation is a price concept. So price gives a signal what would be the demand and what would be the subsequent supply. If an economy is in deflation for longer period, it gives a signal to the bank that economy would face recession in near term. Outcome is the recession. It may so happen then the banks would straight away, the central bank would say, we are adopting dovish stance. Rather than thinking about that period, crisis button press करने से पहले, we are adopting those dovish stance. ठीक है? Accommodative means RBI supports growth. And when RBI says that RBI is supporting growth, RBI is saying RBI would maintain lower policy rates. It won't increase. And neutral stance basically means RBI would wait for the data to emerge from the market, and based on the data, what would be the policy that would be decided, whether it would lead to increase in policy rates or decrease, that would be dependent on the data that is getting generated from the bank, from the market. So that is all about neutral stance. Now this was all the monetary policy. Don't go, there are various terms in monetary policy, don't go deep into it, बहुत ज़्यादा हो जाएगा, UPSC won't be asking those terms. Else it would more look like RBI grade B paper. Even RBI grade B won't be asking those questions. Now the banking system. So banking system, the banking system is classified into three parts. One is commercial, one is cooperative. So the idea is commercial banks have regulation and supervision by RBI. They cater to normal customers or to the public. They accept deposit and they give loans to the public. But what differentiates between commercial bank and cooperative bank is the ownership and customer base. The depositors and customers or the borrowers, as well as the ownership patterns. And the third is developmental financial institutions. They are not into any lending activities. They are all bothered about, although they are into lending activities, but they cater to specific sectors of the economy rather than general public. So commercial banks are defined into I should say public sector bank, then RRBs, then there are differentiated banks, niche banks, then there are foreign banks. Foreign banks. Public sector banks which has ownership of the government as being the largest shareholder, majority shareholder. So there are 12 public sector banks in India. Technically, it is said SBI and other nationalized banks. Together they are known as public sector banks, but SBI has a different act, SBI Act. And nationalized banks are those which got nationalized under the nationalization, banking nationalization. Then private sector banks are all which are owned by private entities like HDFCs, there are many other banks. RRBs which has various control. The ownership is also distributed among three entities: the central bank, or the central government, the state government, as well as some sponsor bank. So that is why RRB has been failing actually. Then foreign banks. So in terms of foreign banks, there are more foreign banks than public sector banks in India. There was more. foreign banks than public sector banks. There are roughly 45-46 public foreign banks in India, or banks, foreign banks which have branches in India, and they are also subjected to priority sector lending if they have minimum number of branches. BS is the target. If they have more than 20 branches, they need to adhere to the PSL norms. Apart from that, there are differentiated banks or niche banks, which are specific purposes. So these are the public sector banks, the SBI, the other nationalized banks, and the regional rural banks. Okay, so details are there in the notes. Paytm Payments Bank. Paytm to it is all about negative information के कारण Paytm has suffered a lot. नहीं, Paytm is a different entity and payment bank is a different entity. So private banks, universal private banks which has all the activities, which acts like a full scheduled commercial banks like HDFC, Kotak Mahindra. There are many private banks, roughly 28-29 private banks in India. And apart from that, differentiated banks, payments bank and small finance banks. So payments bank has this role about only deposits. Do they adhere to those CRR and SLR?
Subject to RBI.
Huh?
No, yes sir, because deposit they are taking.
DS उनको रखना पड़ेगा, नहीं तो फिर तो CRR और SLR तो उनको रखना पड़ेगा, ठीक है ना. Small finance banks just like SCBs but in a niche segment. Yes, everything they have, but the population that they are targeting is more semi-urban and rural communities.
Lesser than RRB.
Lesser than RRB, क्या था ना, RRB has dual role. So SFB has been created to add on what is being done through RRBs, regional rural banks के लिए. So SFB is more related with the banking scheduled. SFBs are scheduled banks, which has controlled and regulated by RBI. But RRB has NABARD also, so that is why they have created a parallel system. What they felt that RRBs are inadequate in terms of the management as well as the way they function. So they have created another segment, small finance bank, although they are also failing.
Sir, they have a district limitation, no? SFB.
They have, this is the district limit. Local area bank has a district. Local area bank has a district limitation, about 2 districts or more, not more 3 districts. That is the idea. So there are very less local area banks. That is the idea. ठीक?
So Paytm और payment bank, right?
Paytm is a दो entity है. Paytm is a non-financial bank, non-banking financial company as well as Paytm Payments Bank. I'll discuss later. Okay. So cooperative bank has dual regulations, and that is why they work in a different manner. There is one member, one vote, and they lend amongst themselves. The depositors and the lenders belong to same category of people, and that is why there is always an issue. They try to collude with the system and they try to do frauds, and that is why most of the cooperative banks, there was a mandate that urban cooperative banks would come under RBI's control. Cooperative bank is a kind of cooperative society. It is a kind of cooperative society which has been registered under the State Act. All because they have a function of equity. One person, one vote. The members are the owners and members can lend among themselves just like an SHG. That leads to certain anomaly. All because of the data. They are not coming up with the reports, audited results, and there is always an issue about defaults. So this urban cooperative banks, they were brought under RBI's control. ठीक है, नहीं तो पहले क्या था ना कि पहले स्टेट गवर्नमेंट हैड बिगर रोल, सो इट वाज ऑल अबाउट politicization and there was higher risk of depositors' money getting at risk. Rural cooperative banks, the state government. There are certain things, rural cooperative banks have certain other things, credits, PACs are this primary agricultural credit societies, that has dual control, NABARD regulates it, at the same time they have to come up with those functions which are through state governments. So state government का भी है, NABARD का भी है, so that is why rural cooperative banks को they have not touched upon. It is all about the urban cooperative bank. Why? Because urban cooperative bank had higher deposits. RBI is all about thinking to make sure that the deposits are safe, because it may lead to bank run or the issue of systemic risk. If many banks, that was why in 2018 many cooperative banks failed.
So this state cooperative and rural, this is a dual control, no? The state government as well as RBI.
Even as NABARD.
NABARD, sorry.
NABARD and
state government.
NABARD and state government.
PAC is wholly by state government. PACs is wholly by state
PACs by state government. NABARD has this role of supervision. If any credit that is getting through PACs or getting, NABARD can say we want the data. They can supervise it. Those microfinance institutions as well as PACs also. लेकिन बेसिकली और क्या होता है कि और भी कुछ बेगर रोल्स होते हैं उसमें. RBI is more into making sure the depositors' money is safe. That is why they have brought in urban cooperative bank under their fold. This is the developmental financial institutions, also known as All India Financial Institutions. This is earlier RBI had certain shares in most of these entities, but now RBI has sold off most of the shares. NABARD hai, SIDBI, NABARD into rural credit, SIDBI into MSME, and through SIDBI another wing has been created, Mudra Bank, but that is under the regulation of SIDBI itself. Mudra is not an autonomous entity, it comes under SIDBI because the mandate is same, MSME. Then Export Import Exim Bank for making sure export credits or trade credits. What happens that suppose an importer wants to purchase things from India, they can ask Exim Bank to give them loans to purchase things from India. In that way, that increases exports from India. Any foreign banks may not be eager to, the domestic bank of that particular country may not be eager to extend those loans, all because settlements of exports happen at some future date. जब consignment पहुंचेगा फिर होगा. So in the meantime, there is always an issue of working capital. So what would happen? Those banks, those parties which are importing from India, they will contact Exim Bank. You extend us those credit because we are buying from your country. So in that way, exports get promoted. ठीक है? And National Housing Bank for housing finance companies. And housing finance companies are those companies wherein 50% of the assets is in the housing sector. The loans that they have given is in the housing sector. It should be more than 50%. If any bank increases its exposure to this sector, then it becomes housing finance companies. 50% का उनका जो asset है, that should go to housing development, मतलब housing finance, loans for home loans and all those things. India Bull Housing, PNB Housing. That is why there is PNB, there is PNB Housing, LIC Housing. So that is a different category. Paytm is an NBFC, non-banking financial company. But Paytm Payments Bank is a payment bank. It is all issue with the payments bank of Paytm, not with the Paytm. But because of the same brand, it is suffering.
Sir, Paytm payment bank, we certain payments bank that they cannot issue credit, but Paytm had a provision of loan also. So
That I
payments
don't.
bank.
Yes, sir, there is a argument, but that he was acting as an agent of some other bank, PDM.
See, payments bank is a failed concept. Payments bank is a failed concept all because how would they earn? How from remittance and all those exchanging things they can earn substantial? It's all about credit. They are not into those credit thing. How can they think that they can earn credit? So क्या किया गया था? Then NBFC, every payment bank has an NBFC attached to it. Like Geo Payment Bank has Geo Financials. So that was the idea, that they will create an NBFC and they will try to do things, but RBI caught payments bank, Paytm को. अब वहाँ पे जितने भी अब payments bank हैं, they will start to fail. Because the main idea is they are not into that loan part. They will not be able to earn substantial revenues. That has been transferred to some other bank. By 15th of March, I guess it will be transferred to Axis Bank. It will use at Paytm, but that at Paytm would the VPA would be transferred to Axis Bank. Axis Bank would be controlling, managing that particular thing. So what is the non-banking financial companies? They are not into banking thing. They are not into deposits. They give loans, but they do not take deposits, barring some of them. Some of them have this NBFCD, but it is only few. I am not aware whether they have. There are only few which have those authority to collect deposits.
So then why are they NBFCs?
That is all. They had those provisions earlier. It is still continuing, but they are into. They have been categorized as NBFC all because they are not under the Schedule 2 of RBI Act. They are not as under the Schedule 2 of Scheduled Commercial Banks, which lists different scheduled commercial banks, scheduled finance banks. That is why NBFC-D बना दिया गया. ठीक है? And NBFC-D needs to adhere to CRR norms. SLR, I am not sure whether they are basically required to maintain SLR, but CRR they need to maintain. NBFC-D, non-deposit, they are not into it. And there was this regulation that CRR and SLR would be applicable to all kinds of NBFCs. तो इसी कारण से उनको थोड़ा रिस्क होने लगा था. Exactly opposite of it. My mistake. SLR norms. SLR norms NBFC-D, not CRR norms. लेकिन बेसिकली क्या है, एम क्या है इनका कि NBFC is all about taking money from some another entity and it channelizes those money. That is the idea. So that is why deposits वाला कोई ज़्यादा criteria आता नहीं है उसके अंदर. At the same time, it is not just money giving या loan giving activity. There are many NBFCs which are into insurance, like Digit. Digit is a company which is an NBFC that is not into any other thing, that is into insurance. Okay? So that is why if it is into the loans and advance segment, it is regulated by RBI. If it is into insurance, IRDAI. And if it is into shares and bonds, बहुत ऐसे हैं जो कि shares बस investment banks are there. They are not into this. They are regulated by SEBI. ठीक है ना, जो investment bonds पे काम करते हैं, जो those are regulated by SEBI.
Can a single non-banking financial company function in multiple areas?
Yeah, LIC has certain things.
So then there are multiple regulators.
Multiple regulator, depending upon the entity.
Won't that create conflict between multiple regulators?
Conflict in the sense, see, every entity has arm's length transaction. So even if they are being controlled by a parent entity, what that subsidiary is doing, that is up to that particular entity. Suppose LIC has one bank, suppose IDBI is being controlled by LIC. IDBI is all up to banking thing, it would be controlled by regulated by RBI. LIC as a whole would be regulated by IRDI. If LIC goes into shares and all those things, SEBI would come into it. If LIC comes into NPS, those NPS में SEBI का role होता है. Depending upon the portfolio where they are into. ठीक है ना?
These fintechs, they provide loan through NBFC. So does not they violate the norms like fintechs?
Fintechs are actually NBFCs. They do not provide. They themselves are NBFCs.
For example, Slice is a company, sir. It provides loan through NBFC. So it is also loaning money to the.
So what is the issue? If they are getting defaulted, it is the NBFC would be charged with. Suppose some another fintechs collaborates with some NBFC. The fintech itself would be considered as an NBFC, and that particular entity is already an NBFC. It is all about deposits that is at risk. वो पैसा अगर उनको डिफॉल्ट पैसा वापस नहीं आया तो क्या होगा? दे विल गेट बैंकरप्टेड, दे विल फाइल फॉर बैंकरप्सी. लेकिन व्हाट अबाउट डिपॉजिटर्स मनी? व्हाई डिपॉजिटर्स मनी इज मोर इम्पोर्टेंट? It is all because they are not taking risk. They had given an assurance was given by the bank that we will keep your deposit safe, but they were not into anything, but they will bear all the issues related with the deposits. So that is why it's all about deposit. अगर fintech ने कुछ काम गलत किया तो fintech would close down. Is any depositors money getting affected? It is the bank who has given money to NBFC. It is a money bank who would be answerable to RBI, not the fintech. ठीक है? अगर ओवर रेगुलेशन होना स्टार्ट हो गया ना तो फिर द ग्रोथ वुड गो डाउन.
इनमें सर वो एनपीए वगैरह तो बहुत ज्यादा होंगे.
किसमें?
इसमें सर एनबीएफसी वगैरह
नहीं होते ना. दे आर टू मच प्रूडेंशियल इन गिविंग लोन्स. दे नो हाउ टू रिकवर इट. दे नो हाउ टू रिकवर इट. वैसा नहीं होता है कि किसी को भी जाओ देते चले जाएंगे. दे नो ऑल द टैक्टिक्स. पता है ना सुसाइड कर लिया था. ऑल द टैक्टिक्स दैट पेमेंट को दे नो ऑल द टैक्टिक्स टू गेट देयर मनी बैक. ठीक है? सो द बेसल नॉर्म्स हैज बीन it has been actually taught this capital adequacy ratio, and this capital adequacy ratio has been already done, and India maintains capital adequacy ratio of 12 to 15%. Even public sector bank maintain at 16%. Some of the banks are adequately placed at 16%. So do not want to take the risk. So the non-performing assets, it is those assets which are not, the recovery is not, the interest or principal is not getting repaid back to the lender, and if it is more, the due is more than 90 days, it goes into NPA account, and if it is more than 12 months, it is roughly stressed or loss account. And generally what happens, if it goes into this loss account, they try to write it off. Write off means they try to put that thing out of the book of the bank, so as to ensure that the provisioning norms, provisioning is all about the amount of money that has to be kept aside out of the profit to make up for the any potential loss that may happen in terms of money not getting recovered because of higher NPAs. So to reduce provision, they try to write it off. So write-off is just an accounting exercise. It does not mean that the bank would not be going for recovery of the amount. What would happen? एक साल में अगर कभी पैसा अगर फंस गया होगा तो क्या करेंगे, अगले साल वहाँ पे वो राइट ऑफ कर देंगे. If in future that money gets recovered, they'll say undisclosed, or they'll say other profits or some different types of profits, they'll disclose it in that portion. So the money gets recovered back into the system. So that goes through different stages जहाँ पे banks needs to take certain amount of hit, that is known as haircuts. जहाँ पे जितना लोन लिया उसमें से एक portion that is all about understanding between the person who is taking the loan and the banks to recover something out of that particular loan. That is the idea. कितना पैसा लग गया उसमें से कुछ तो निकल जाए. That is the idea. Rather than not getting it, why banks are writing it off? So as to unlock provision वाला पैसा. Exactly. If that is getting forwarded, more money is being locked through provision. If that is getting wrote off, what would happen? The loan is removed from the bank's account. At the same time, provision also goes down. So that extra amount is unlocked for lending purpose. At the same time, what would happen in future if they recover some amount? They'll say certain profits, some from different types, other profits. But waiver is all about not asking for any. It's done and dusted. We won't be asking for the money to get back into the banking system. Write-offs. Waivers is all related with the social factors. इसलिए अगर corporate waivers होने लग जाएं then तो banking collapses. That is all that is the idea. Paytm खराब बर्बाद हो रहा है, and Paytm, what is the difference between Paytm Payments Bank and Paytm? All because they had similar names. That was the most foolish act a company could do. All because Paytm Payments Bank suffered, the image of Paytm is getting hit. They could have created another entity with another name. Why to use Paytm? They thought of leveraging the brand name of Paytm. It backfired. In general public, it is being said Paytm is getting closed. 31 March is the date. 29th March, Paytm is stopping operations. People are moving away from Paytm. All because Paytm payment. Vijay Shekhar Sharma has resigned from Paytm Payments Bank, this board, not Paytm. तो ये होता है, if you try to be over smart, backfire करेंगे. Okay. Then we'll see the questions. Okay, straight away we'll see the questions.
Sir, what is asset reconstruction company? ARC?
Asset reconstruction companies. So, do you want to know about asset reconstruction or NARCL? See what happens. Asset reconstruction company, what banks say? Bank के साथ क्या problem है? Bank is into lending activities. But what happened because of mounting debt, bank had more non-performing assets. तो बैंक को ऐसा लगा कि rather than keeping those assets with them, why not sell to a specialized agency which is into unlocking values from those stressed assets. So that is the idea of asset reconstruction company. They are professionals. They try to repackage those stressed assets. तो बैंक से साथ क्या करते हैं? Okay, you have 10 करोड़ या 100 करोड़ का आपके पास stressed assets है. You straight away sell it to us at 60 crore. Banks would be feeling, okay, we are getting 60 crore at this. We will use it for lending purpose, and it is for the ARC to unlock those capital which is getting stuck. And to make it more nationalized, they have made a twin concept of NARCL and Indian Dev. What is that? No. Indian Debt Resolution comes something like that. That is the idea. So what would happen? NARCL would buy things from banks and that debt resolution company would repackage and sell it. उस तरह से वो both combination would make bad bank concept, but it is not good for India के concept context में it is not applicable or not fruitful. All because India में जो bankruptcy है ना, it's all because of issues with lending. The lending norms are violated all because of certain collusion between people. That is leading to more NPAs in corporate. If you talk about issues in retail loans, that is all because inability to repay it back. Paying capacity का jobs चले गए तो इस कारण से NPA हो गया. But in corporates, it's all about the issue with the corporate governance. That is leading to NPAs. So NPA.
Small amount of loan have lesser NPAs.
But NPAs all because they feel that if their credit score goes bad, they won't be having any further rounds of lending in future. They are more bothered about their credit score. That is why there is lower default rate in retail lending. But that is not applicable with NVA, corporate lending. So the first question is sterilization, conducting open market operations. Sterilization ka not definition, it is a two-step process. Sterilization and OMO have distincts of if sterilization about first into currency market, then second step is OMO. These two together is known as sterilization. RBI goes into currency market, manages the currency in terms of inflow or outflow, and subsequently does open market operations so as to maintain the same level or desired level of liquidity. Both step together is known as sterilization. Sterilization क्या होगा? Foreign entity germs आया, उसको हटाना है. Sterilization is that concept. From that they have borrowed that sterilization. Foreign entity आया, उसके कारण कुछ negative impact हमारी economy body पे ना हो जाए, तो RBI comes up with a tool. Borrow लिया, पैसे तो देना, और it's all about current account convertibility. At the same time, capital account it is also allowed, partially it is allowed, but to ensure that there is no ill effect on the liquidity part and the inflation, but they come up with another tool, OMO साथ में parallel कर देते हैं. That is sterilization. ठीक है ना? Together तो यार इतना deep में नहीं जाता है, सीधा सीधा कुछ. Forex बढ़ता ही है. बढ़ता ही है, दैट इज द ओनली आइडिया. फॉरेक्स बढ़ता ही है. हाँ, फॉरेक्स बढ़ा, पैसा मार्केट में ना जाकर आरबीआई ने वापस अब्सॉर्ब कर लिया. देन दिस क्वेश्चन, द सेल्फ हेल्प ग्रुप प्रोग्राम वाज ओरिजिनली इनिशिएटेड बाय द स्टेट बैंक ऑफ इंडिया. नहीं, नबार्ड ने किया था. स्टेट एसएचजी बैंक लिंकिंग प्रोजेक्ट, BLP, SHG BLP. ठीक है? In an SHG, all members of a group take responsibility for a loan that an individual member takes. Collective responsibility, that is the idea of SHG. The regional rural banks and SCBs support SHGs, obviously. SHG is one of the part of PSL. Microfinance is one of the part of PSL. So SHG, SCB अगर direct support भी नहीं करते हैं, they give loans to MFIs, and MFIs in turn give loans to SHGs. So in a way SCBs support SHGs. ठीक है? So 2 correct. If the inflation is too high, Reserve Bank of India. अच्छा, एक चीज़ मैं बता देता हूँ कि कभी कभी ना क्वेश्चन आपने बना भी रखा होगा, फिर से सॉल्व. इकोनॉमी में ये बहुत अच्छी चीज़ है, आप फिर भी सॉल्व करोगे कॉन्सेप्ट, आपको 1 महीने के बाद फिर लगेगा कि यार लगाना पड़ेगा दिमाग. ऐसा नहीं है कि याद है वो चीज़. अगर कॉन्सेप्ट आप ट्राई कर लेना, एट द एंड ऑफ द कोर्स ये फिर आप लगोगे यार फिर से दिमाग लगाना पड़ रहा है. तो इफ द इन्फ्लेशन इज टू हाई, रिजर्व बैंक ऑफ इंडिया इज लाइकली टू बाई गवर्नमेंट सिक्योरिटीज, सेल इट. If the rupee is rapidly depreciating, RBI is likely to sell dollars in the market. It's a true.
फॉरेन मार्केट में कैसे काम करते हैं?
डिप्रिशिएट कर रहा है, then the demand of dollars are increasing. So how to arrest this depreciation? To increase the supply of dollars. It will start selling dollars.
Gap will decrease.
ठीक है? If the interest rates in the USA or European Union were to fall, that is likely to induce RBI to buy dollars, and that is if interest rates in US or EU is falling, RBI is likely to buy dollar. How? This is a correct statement.
Because the foreign investor will come to the
Exactly. They'll feel that it is more promising, but returns are better in India now. The interest rates difference. How FIIs work? They try to gauge the domestic interest rate and interest rate in foreign market. So they'll feel it is attractive to invest in India. So how would they come in India? They'll come with dollars and they'll ask for Indian currency. So in that way, RBI would likely to buy dollars. So only to this is incorrect then. This is incorrect. B is the answer. This question, but that was the catch. अगर यहाँ decrease हो जाता तो दो आंसर हो जाता. इसको मिस डायरेक्ट इम्पैक्ट है, इसलिए वो उसको देख करके ऐसा नहीं कि फटाफट आंसर देखने के लिए. अगर यही अगर 2-3 स्टेटमेंट्स वाले अगर होते, हाउ मेनी ऑफ द स्टेटमेंट्स आर करेक्ट एंड डिक्रीज, तो 2 स्टेटमेंट्स आर करेक्ट. ठीक है ना? गॉट इट ना? ठीक. दिस इज अ वेरी सिंपल क्वेश्चन. ये पिछली बार यूपीएससी में इसी से रिलेटेड क्वेश्चन आया था सेम, थोड़ा सा ट्विक किया गया इसमें. ठीक है. This question first is wrong. How is it wrong?
So because if people have more money, they'll not invest in bonds. They'll try to invest in better sources, then they'll get more money.
But then it will become positive. Correct statement. What you are saying, based on that, the bond prices should fall.
People will be more keen to buy bonds.
Bonds. They will be more keen to buy bonds, all because bond is a fixed income instrument. That too for a longer period. So if interest rate is more related to FD and short-term instrument. If short-term instrument rates are decreasing, what is more favorable? To buy long-term instruments. So people will rush to buy bonds. Bonds जब खरीदेंगे तो bond prices would increase. And that is how yield rates and market rates converge at a point. How they converge? Short-term rates, जैसे अब for the FD rates goes down. Expansionary माने policy rates goes down. So FD rates also goes down. People would try to rush for buying bonds. What would happen? Bond price would increase. And if bond price increases, the yield goes down. And in that way, yield and short-term interest rate try to merge together. So this is how they try to gauge. Investors इस तरह से gauge करते हैं ठीक है ना, डिफरेंट मार्केट्स में मूव करके, आर्बिट्राज काइंड ऑफ फंड, दिस इज काइंड ऑफ आर्बिट्राज. This question. With reference to the legal definition of narrow money and broad money, an increase in interest rate of all saving schemes is most likely to increase the base of narrow money. All saving schemes, small saving schemes. पोस्ट ऑफिस आ जाएगा उसमें. नैरो मनी नहीं होगा, ब्रॉड मनी होगा. समझ में आया? ठीक है, यू गॉट दैट फर्स्ट पॉइंट? नहीं पता चला? M1, M2, M3, M4. M4 has all deposits with post office. पोस्ट ऑफिस में ऑल स्मॉल सेविंग इंस्ट्रूमेंट स्कीम में कुछ पोस्ट ऑफिस सेविंग स्कीम इंस्ट्रूमेंट्स भी होते हैं, फिक्स्ड वो डिपॉजिट स्कीम्स होते हैं, टाइम डिपॉजिट्स होते हैं. उनके भी अगर वो इंटरेस्ट अगर बढ़ जाएंगे तो उनका अगर डिपॉजिट बेस बढ़ा तो व्हाट वुड हैपन, दैट वुड इंक्रीज द ब्रॉड मनी, नॉट द नैरो मनी. M4 बढ़ जाएगा, नॉट द M1 और M1 और M2 आर द नैरो पार्ट, M3 and M4 आर broad part. An increase in the number of bank accounts can increase the number of bank accounts can increase the base of broad money. Obviously accounts बढ़ेंगे, number of, ठीक है ना. Can is a subjective term. If it can, then you need to take it as right. Will में फिर गलत हो जाएगा, ठीक है ना. गॉट इट? विल में इट इज एन इनकरेक्ट स्टेटमेंट बिकॉज अदर ऑप्शन में बी दैट की M2 बढ़ गया, बस M1 बढ़ा, M3 बढ़ा ही नहीं, सब सेविंग्स डिपॉजिट में रख रहे, किसी ने टाइम डिपॉजिट किया ही नहीं. बट इट कैन ऑल्सो ना, दिस विड्रॉल ऑफ 2000 नोट्स फ्रॉम सर्कुलेशन may have no effect on the base of narrow money. Initially it will go to the savings deposit. Initially पैसा 2000 रुपये में ऐसा थोड़ी है कि you will say to bank, okay just keep it, don't credit the same amount in the bank deposit. So the base of narrow money remains same. ठीक है ना. करेंसी वाला पार्ट may get changed, करेंसी से वो पैसा मूव करके नैरो मनी के दूसरे पार्ट में, डिपॉजिट्स वाले पार्ट में, ठीक है ना. If I ask you M0, will it change?
It will remain same.
M0.
Currency in circulation.
It goes down. M0 changes.
But the banker is giving 500 notes solution to the person.
At the same time, अभी करेंसी इन सर्कुलेशन वाला पार्ट में बस वो देखो कि डिपॉजिट में बस हो गया, करेंसी इन सर्कुलेशन वाला पार्ट से वापस कर, नैरो मनी का नहीं पूछ रहा हूँ. M0 में करेंसी इन सर्कुलेशन से डिपॉजिट कर दिया, हाँ. M0 में चेंज आ सकता है. कैन, विल नहीं, कैन.
But bank will also deposit the money with RBI, right? The 2000 notes. They'll give it to RBI.
But currency in circulation is going down, na. Deposit with RBI is something different. It is the CRR part basically. Is the bank depositing equal amount with RBI? Only 4% of our thing would get deposited, na.
Currency in circulation is basically public. How much public is it?
Currency in circulation is currency with bank plus currency with public. But demonetization means the money is not a legal tender altogether. The same amount may get credited in the bank account. कि 2000 रुपए कैश लो, 2000 मेरे अकाउंट में डाल देना. जरूरी थोड़ी कि सबने एक्सचेंज करा ही लिया होगा पैसा. डिमोनेटाइजेशन में सबने 500 का नोट थोड़ी दोबारा ले लिया कि आप 2000 पैसा पूरा लो, पूरा कैश मेरे को हाथ में दो अभी के अभी. वो तो डिपॉजिट बढ़ा. दैट वाज व्हाई ICRR वाज स्टार्टेड ना. अगर पूरा कैश सेम ही एक्सचेंज होता तो फिर ICRR का कॉन्सेप्ट ही नहीं आएगा.
So sir, this 2000 note is not neither with the bank also.
It goes, so currency, if I say currency in circulation is issued minus taken back. तो टेकन बैक वाला पोर्शन माइनस ज्यादा हो जाएगा ना, करेंसी सर्कुलेशन गोज डाउन. नेट इशू जो होता है, नेट, इट इज ऑल अबाउट नेट इशू. इफ इट इज गेटिंग डिमोनेटाइज्ड, व्हाट वुड हैपन? नैरो मनी, द बेस वुड रिमेन सेम, बट व्हाट अबाउट बेस मनी, रिजर्व मनी? इट वुड आल्सो fall down.
So, but demonetization and withdrawal of notes is different. It's not necessarily that the notes that are being withdrawn are taken.
It has been, the question has been framed from the angle of demonetization of the 2000 rupee note. Had it been,
Because they are still legal tender, 2000 rupee notes. Yes, they are still legal tender.
the still legal tender,
They are still legal tender.
Yes, critical.
maybe then
The website it is written.
डिमोनेटाइजेशन नहीं हुआ है, सर्कुलेशन से हटाया है बस.
circulation से हटाया है.
डिमोनेटाइजेशन नहीं हुआ है.
But they started with this there, they are from 30th of this September.
सिर्फ सर्कुलेशन से रिमूव कर दिया बस.
They said that they're trying to withdraw it from.
कल भी था आरबीआई की वीडियो.
Although legal tender, not legal tender is the mandate of the government, RBI cannot take actions, but the question has been framed from that angle. Okay? And increase in, see, economy में ना कभी कभी कुछ चीज 3-4 concepts एक साथ काम करते हैं. It is very difficult कि एक चीज काम करे. That is why our UPSC always say is likely, most likely, can, they cannot say will, is, वो कभी भी affirmative sentences they cannot come up with this. An increase in loan to value ratio can effectively tackle recession in an economy. Correct है, ठीक है ना? अभी
इसका ऑप्शन नहीं होना चाहिए आंसर.
क्यों?
So out of the birth certificate statement of income, how is facing nation of statement?
Increase in consumption expenditure mostly.
Direct link नहीं है ना.
Okay. B should be the answer. Everything is, so that part is M4 वाले पार्ट में. ये और ये तो सरकार बोलती है पब्लिक अकाउंट ऑफ इंडिया पे भेज दो. That is why they have increased senior citizen savings scheme का भी, that has got increased to 30 lakh. Earlier it was 15 lakhs only. So when RBI buys government securities, it can increase borrowing cost in the, it decreases borrowing costs in the market. When RBI sells government security, it can depreciate the rupees.
RBI still government security.
Supply कम कर रहे हैं ना market से.
No sir,
Appreciate supply.
Exactly. ठीक है ना? मनी सप्लाई से, थ्रू मनी सप्लाई, कंट्रोल ऑफ लिक्विडिटी, appreciation, depreciation. So UMOs basically is also targeted at maintaining currency exchange rates.
Cost is wrong sir. Investment certificates both due to the lower interest rate. Higher interest.
So what does medium term mean? मतलब कितने time?
जैसे अभी अगर लॉन्ग टर्म, मीडियम, शॉर्ट मीडियम टर्म और लॉन्ग टर्म का है ना, तो 3, 7 और 15 चलता है गवर्नमेंट का. शॉर्ट टर्म इज 3 years, 3 फिजिकल ईयर्स. 7 years में लॉन्ग टर्म इज लॉन्गर विजन. बट इन बैंकिंग टर्म्स और कैपिटल मार्केट, शॉर्ट लॉन्ग का इज 1 year वाला क्राइटेरिया. शॉर्ट टर्म इज लॉन्ग 1 year, below long term, below 1 year and above 1 year. It's all related to the capital gain taxes, the taxes which are getting imposed. Long term is all related with the asset appreciation. Short term is all about income generation. So short term is all related with the addition of the particular amount to the income of the investor.
So if in case of medium there was short or long, the answer would have been the same.
But what happens? Not investment cycles always gets boosted in long low interest rate or in the medium term. Negative growth ना तुरंत नहीं दिखता है. It always has a lag. Why? Short. Why we had 5%, 4.5% in 2018, 2017, and 2019? All because NPAs were higher in 2015, 16, and 17. That led to growth. नीचे चला गया. We had COVID. COVID was a boon to us in terms of economy. Actually, जितने भी पाप थे हमने COVID के नाम पे धो दिए. We got that higher 3% वाला breach. खत्म किया हमने. We reached 10%. And from 10%, now we are saying glide path to 3% till 2030. वो आएगा नहीं कभी. So those things is a boon for governments and financial markets. बहुत अच्छा होता है. सब चीज all because of the COVID, it was down. All because of the COVID. कोई याद नहीं कर रहा 2019 का डेटा क्या था. Everything, and from the pent up demand that we had, everything looks rosy. 17, 18, 18, 19, 19, 20. 2021 it was all because of the COVID. हर चीज खराब था. 3.5%. Why we did not achieve? All because of the COVID. After that, the government got Pandora box. 10%. They can shoot up to 10%. RBI had all the authorities. They knew it. In the next 3 to 5 to 6 years, actually, we need to recover that amount. जो हमने lose out किया है ना, minus 23% in one quarter. 23.9% of the GDP was negative. So if you calculate the real value of GDP at 160 lakh crore, 24% of 160 lakh is 40 lakh crore of economy getting erased. अगर 40 लाख करोड़ को ही हमको रिकवर करना है ना, उसको अगर हम सेगमेंटेड जोड़ेंगे ना, तो इट विल टेक 5 to 7 years more. Because the base went down, now we have it started adding, so it is looking rosy that it is growing at a faster rate. In reality, 40 lakh crore getting eroded, we need to recover that amount first. समझ रहे हो ना, वो 6% का ही एक्चुअल ग्रोथ चल रहा है अभी. In reality, it is the 6% growth that is happening. That is the idea. Stock market has this fall. अगर आप यहाँ से देखोगे तो लगेगा कि कितना अच्छा बूम किया. कोई आदमी अगर यहाँ पे खरीदा होगा बोलेगा कि यार क्या फायदा, कुछ रिटर्न ही नहीं है, कोई रिटर्न ही नहीं आया मुझे. It depends upon what is the time frame. ठीक है. Consider following statement about financial stability report. The first is correct. Biannually 6 महीने पे निकालते हैं. और assessment of financial stability and development council. It includes the finance minister as well as those regulators. It's all into the systemic risk, the financial systemic risk. They talk about what is the current scenario. Then monetization of deficit. Monetization, deficit. First wrong, it's the primary market. Monetization of deficit means the government runs into fiscal deficit and it asks RBI to print equal amount of currency, GSEP. At the same time, what?
Government want it can also buy कैसे करेगा?
What is the idea?
Can RBI purchase government bonds in prime?
Monetization of deficit happens. RBI issues it and RBI buys it. That is the idea. RBI ने issue किया, RBI ने खरीद लिया. It is all the money from RBI has gone to the government. From primary market itself. Open market operation is in the secondary market. But we are talking about monetization of deficit. So deficit means the government needs to issue bond and RBI is being told to buy those bonds. It has stopped. It has stopped. All because we are developing the return on investment on India as a whole is more than the cost of capital for any foreign entity or any entity who is ready to invest in the bonds. So that is why it is easy to buy those government bonds, and it is also favorable. Many high net worth individuals are actually buying those government bonds. HNIs are buying because they feel it at 7%, 6.5%, it is more fruitful because they won't be getting real interest rates. If we see the real rate of return, currently it is 2%. Or why? Because 7% is the FD rates currently and inflation is 5% roughly. So 2% is the interest rate. But what happened earlier, where the interest rates were in the territory of 5 to 6% and inflation was in the territory of 5 to 6%, so the real rates were negative. So it was more favorable to buy bonds. Bonds में क्या होता है ना, the people would say कि 8% अगर अभी मिल रहा है ना, it would accrue till 15 years. So rather than going into equity market, they feel that they need to park their a particular portion in a fixed instrument because it is secured. अपने कैपिटल को भी वो प्रोटेक्ट करते हैं. ऐसा नहीं है कि रिस्की इन्वेस्टमेंट्स में ला करके वो सोचेंगे क्या फ़ायदा है, हम तो इस इक्विटी मार्केट में ही पूरा पैसा लगा दें. बट अ पोर्शन ऑफ देयर नेट वर्थ इज गेटिंग लॉक्ड इन गवर्नमेंट बॉन्ड्स so as to make sure that they'll be getting 7 to 8% for next 15 years. Because they're not buying 50 lakh 1 lakh crore ka, they are buying 500 crores. Straight away they are buying. So in the secondary market, this becomes, it is allowed as per the FRBM but only under exceptional circumstances. This is correct. It may lead to inflation and macroeconomic instability. This is also correct. Stability. सब सी देखो क्या होता है ना, इन इकोनॉमिक्स एनीथिंग कैन बी प्रूवन बाय एनी एक्ट, बट व्हाट इज मोर कोरिलेशन which is having higher direct correlation, that is the answer. An increase in liquidity may not depreciate currency, but it is higher likelihood that it can depreciate currency. समझ रहे हो ना कि ये नहीं हो सकता है कि आप प्रूव कर दूंगा मैं कि अगर करेंसी रेट्स अप्रिशिएट भी कर जाएंगे, इट डिप्रिशिएट्स, बट ऐसा नहीं होगा, हमेशा होगा. इवन इन इंडिया वी हैव हायर इंटरेस्ट रेट्स, स्टिल वी हैव हायर कॉर्पोरेट लेंडिंग, still we are higher loan growth demand, still we are having tight monetary policy at 6.5% policy rates. It is one of the highest in the history. Still we have higher credit demand. So all those tight monetary policy का जो theory हमने पढ़ा था, that gets violated. The loan growth rates are very high in India right now, 17%. It is growing more than the nominal rates. Why? Because there is pent up demand. And people are thinking that this rate is here to stay. They feel that the return on investment is better than the cost of capital, and that is why there is high appreciation in real estate prices. Real estate prices क्यों भाग रहे हैं? The loan rates are higher, but they feel that it is more speculative now. They feel that the rate of investment is higher than the cost of capital, and that is why the real estate prices are rising higher, and they are buying things despite cost of capital being high. तो इकोनॉमी 1 to 1 तो चलता ही नहीं ना कि कुछ एक चीज ले लेंगे ये तो होना ही, ऐसा होगा ही नहीं. फिजिक्स तो चलना नहीं है कि ये कर देंगे तो ऐसे चले. सो ये ऐसा सिचुएशन है कि लोग लोन ले करके अपना नेटवर्थ बढ़ा रहे हैं, लोन ले करके नेटवर्थ बढ़ा रहे हैं. द सेम थिंग हर्षद मेहता वाला सिनेरियो, तो उसमें तो इक्विटी में चला गया था, ये सिक्योर्ड इन्वेस्टमेंट में चला गया. लोन लिया और एक प्रॉपर्टी में लगा, प्रॉपर्टी का रेट्स बढ़ गया, वहां पे से उनको रेंटल यील्ड्स बढ़ गया, दे आर रेडी टू फाइनेंस दैट थिंग. सो टाइट मॉनेटरी पॉलिसी स्टिल लीड्स टू मोर डिमांड, इट इज लीडिंग टू, बट इट इज नॉट द केस इन जनरल. ठीक है ना, कुछ भी प्रूव किया जा सकता है इन इकोनॉमिक्स. एवरीथिंग इज पोस्ट फैक्टो. हो जाने के बाद वी कम अप विथ अ पोस्टुलेट और अ थ्योरी दैट इट कुड हैव हैपेंड. दिस कैपिटल एडिक्वेसी रेशियो, हाँ
Core is only tier 1, right? Core 1.
बट कैन फॉर्म इन द फॉर्म ऑफ नॉन कोर कैपिटल ऑल्सो, ठीक है ना.
Sir, but different
But
bank
they have to maintain in the form of core capital. It signifies that only core capital.
सी अगर जनरली क्या होता है ना, टीयर 1 इज द वन थिंग दैट इज मोर इम्पॉर्टेंट. टीयर 2 तो बस बोलने को है. इट इज नॉट कि टीयर 2 को आप टीयर 1 से रिप्लेस, टीयर 1 को टीयर 2 से रिप्लेस कर दोगे. फर्स्ट कोर हैज टू बी मेंटेन्ड. देयर इज अ मैंडेट दैट इन 9% 7.5 शुड बी कोर. बोलो ना, ज़्यादा डीप में मत जाओ. बहुत सा उस 7.5 में भी देयर इज अ नीड दैट सम ऑफ द पोर्शन शुड बी floated or should come from the promoters rather than reserves. Promoters means those who have floated the company or who are the owners of the company. So they are known as promoters.
Sir, this CAR, sir, CR is decided by because based on the RWA, what they have, on that CR is decided, sir.
कैसे?
Limit.
Ratio is decided. They can have. I am talking about the limit. 9%. आपको रखना है 20% रखो ना. You are thinking of maintaining too much cushion. Yeah, that is decided by the regulator RBI. ठीक है ना. It is not decided by bank. अब देखो what happens. Policy they have decided. It is not mandatory for banks to pass on those policy rates to the lenders or to the borrowers. डिपॉजिटर्स को भी नहीं दे सकते हैं और बोरोवर्स को भी जरूरी नहीं है. दैट इज वाई दे कम अप विथ मोरल सुअसन ऑल्सो कि टू ट्राई टू ट्रांसमिट दोज पॉलिसी रेट्स टू डिपॉजिटर्स एज वेल एज बोरोवर्स. वो मार्जिन बढ़ा लेते हैं अपना. आरबीआई ओके, ठीक है. ऑपरेशन वो यील्ड को मेंटेन करने के लिए, शॉर्ट टर्म और लॉन्ग टर्म का यील्ड को मेंटेन करने के लिए ऑपरेशन ट्विस्ट था. यील्ड अगर देखो, यील्ड एंड इंटरेस्ट रेट्स आर कोरिलेटेड. RBI knows that they can control yield वाला part. If monetary policy transmission is not happening, they will try to make sure कि yield को वो change करना start करे. और yield change करने से interest rate, bond prices would change, and in that way interest rate has to be passed because loan growth, loan demand, depositors base would get affected. In that way, interest rate would align with the policy rates. Suppose monetary policy transmission is not happening. Banks feel that they have more depositors base or depositors are not moving. It is the bread and butter for the banks. तो वो नहीं कर रहे हैं, तब क्या करेंगे? तो RBI says कि we start with yield को change करके. In that way, the interest rate in the market gets fluctuated. डायरेक्ट तो नहीं कर सकते ना, पॉलिसी रेट्स बस एक सेट कर सकते हैं.
So what happens is that the central bank, it will buy the long-term bonds. So by buying the long-term bonds, it is going to create a increase in the supply of. It is going to reduce the supply of long-term bonds in the market. So the bond prices of long-term bonds will increase. The bond yield will decrease. So the interest rate in that time would.
It depends on what the RBI wants. RBI का जरूरी नहीं है कि यही प्रोसीजर हमेशा करेंगे. वो वही बोला कि डिफाइन एक पर्टिकुलर चीज को निकाल करके ये नहीं देखना कि ऑपरेशन ट्विस्ट में लॉन्ग टर्म बॉन्ड खरीद के ये करेंगे. इट इज मोर कॉम्प्लेक्स. शॉर्ट टर्म बॉन्ड, मीडियम टर्म बॉन्ड में कैसे वो यील्ड कर्व जा रहा है उस हिसाब से वो चेक करेंगे क्या करना है. ऐसा स्पेसिफिक्स में कभी भी नहीं करेंगे. हमेशा अगर ऑपरेशन ट्विस्ट करना है तो हम ये करेंगे ही करेंगे, नहीं तो फिर बैंक्स को पता चल जाएगा देयर इज अ लूप होल, दे विल ट्राई सम अनदर वे. तो ये आइडिया रहता है कि बस ये है कि दे ट्राई टू चेंज इंटरेस्ट रेट्स, दे ट्राई टू नज द पॉलिसी, मॉनेटरी पॉलिसी ट्रांसमिशन थ्रू चेंज इन यील्ड कर्व. इस तरह से वो करते हैं. ये जो यील्ड कर्व क्या होता है कि बॉन्ड्स का जो मैच्योरिटी पीरियड होता है ना, देयर इज अ मैच्योरिटी अलग अलग सेगमेंट पे अलग अलग बॉन्ड्स आर गेटिंग फ्लक्चुएशन, सो अलग अलग यील्ड होगा सबका, और वो कर्व फिर बन जाता है, उसको ट्रेस द यील्ड वैल्यूज ऑफ बॉन्ड्स, अलग अलग मैच्योरिंग बॉन्ड्स का जो होगा पीरियड, उस पर जस्ट कर्व इट ट्रेस करेगा, दैट बिकम्स यील्ड कर्व, एंड दैट इज अप टू द सेंट्रल बैंक टू डिसाइड डिपेंडिंग अपॉन द डिमांड ऑफ द गवर्नमेंट ऑल्सो. Government also needs to know कि how much is the yield, because based on the yield curve they will freshly issue those coupon rates. जो अब नया fresh issue करेंगे, what should be the coupon rate? Prevailing rate yield rate अगर बहुत ज़्यादा है और कूपन कम वो इशू करेंगे तो सब्सक्राइब भी कोई नहीं करेगा, फिर कोई करेगा? कोई नहीं करेगा. तो बेस्ड ऑन दैट यील्ड कर्व को मेंटेन करते हैं कि बहुत ज़्यादा हाई भी नहीं जाना चाहिए, बहुत ज़्यादा हाई चला जाएगा तो डिपॉजिटर्स बेस में गेट इरोडेड, सिस्टमिक रिस्क हो जाएगा. और अगर बहुत लो चला गया तो इस केस में क्या चला जाएगा कि लोग क्या करना स्टार्ट करेंगे, यील्ड में अगर बहुत लो चला जाएगा तो बॉन्ड का प्राइस बहुत हाई चला गया है, ओवर उस पर चला गया, प्राइस बहुत ऊपर चला गया है, तो इंटरेस्ट रेट को उससे अलाइन कराना पड़ जाएगा, पॉलिसी रेट्स को, बिकॉज बॉन्ड का जो डिमांड है दैट इज डिपेंडेंट अपॉन ना कि क्या गवर्नमेंट का रेवेन्यू है, गवर्नमेंट को कितना फिस्कल डेफिसिट हो रहा है, उस पर डिपेंड कर रहा है कि कितना इश्यूज करेंगे वो, और यील्ड फिर उससे काम करता है. हालांकि वो ऑपरेशन जो करते हैं वो ओपन मार्केट ऑपरेशन, दैट इज ऑल्सो यूज्ड टू स्टेबलाइज द यील्ड्स. सो डोंट गो डीप कि कैसे वो करते हैं, वो बहुत डीप होता है, इतना सिंपल मेथोडोलॉजी नहीं होता है कि इसको खरीद लेंगे इसको बेच देंगे तो यील्ड ऑटोमेटिकली गेट्स चेंज, इतना ईजी नहीं होता है. There are many parameters that are